Thanks, man.
That's for you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you joining us. All right, before I go forward, we have a scout with us this evening from Troop 477. I understand you're working on your communications merit badge. That's why you're here. Landon, welcome. Glad to have you with us this afternoon. All right, the next item we have up this evening, announcements of upcoming city events. Mr. Waite.
Yes, Mayor, members of council. Next Monday, February 19th, just a reminder, city offices will be closed in observance of President's Day. And then we come back on February 20th, that evening, a week from tonight. 6:30 p.m. is our first Council on the Go of this year. It's going to be at Ray Corbett Junior High School, starting at 6:30. And that address is 12,000 Ray Corbett Drive, just off 1518. Wednesday, the next night, Main Street, we're going to have a Main Street Stakeholders Input meeting at 5 o'clock. That's at the Schertz Civic Center Bluebonnet Hall. And then Friday and Saturday of next week, the 23rd and 24th, the Library Advisory Board is holding its annual book sale from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. both days. Fill a bag with books for $4 per bag. Saturday, February 24th, is also the 8th annual Selma Schertz Salute to Services 5K run. Begins at Bluebonnet Palace. Registration and packet pickups from 7 to 8:45 in the morning with a 9 o'clock lineup for the 5K and an opening ceremony. After race party will also be held. And then our regular council meeting we're back on for February 27th. And then Saturday, March 3rd is the annual Willinchecks Walk for Life. It's our 10th annual 5K walk. Begins in the Samuel Clemens parking lot. It has an 8 o'clock check-in with a 9 o'clock 5K start. You can also register online at active.com or visit schertz.com. Any questions, you can call Public Affairs at 210-619-1635.
Thank you, sir. Next item on the agenda, announcements and recognitions by our acting city manager, Mr. James.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. A couple of staff I want to recognize, two that received their 10-year service pins today, both out of purchasing. One is Nancy Tumlinson, and the other is Jerry McFarland. Some of you may have run across them periodically. They don't tend to get up and speak before council very much, but both have been with us over 10 years, helping us out. And again, I think they are a couple of the folks, when we talk about folks at Schertz being nice and helpful, they epitomize that. So greatly appreciate the work that they do. So the other thing that you may notice, we had some glitches last week with our Wi-Fi. So IT jumped all over that. They have upgraded the access points, so you should see faster service by about 50%. And that included installing a dedicated Wi-Fi connection at the podium. So we're doing presentations going in, that should work. Relocating the Wi-Fi to a stronger signal, and they will be monitoring that going forward. But again, hopefully we've made a fair amount of improvement there. The other thing is kudos to the public affairs team. One of the things that you may recall in the employee engagement survey that we heard about that we could do better on is communicating. The public affairs department has created the Schertz Short, not Schertz Shorts, but Short, which is a newsletter to try to keep our staff informed. They email it out, we'll post it around. So again, trying to keep everybody up to speed on things they need to know going on around the office. So that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Next on the agenda, announcements and recognitions by the mayor. I don't have any this evening. And the next thing from there are the hearing of residents. And first to sign up this evening is Bill Schwinn.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bill Schwind, S-C-H-W-I-N-D. As you can tell from the signs along the roadside, we're in an election cycle. Each of you were elected, and so you know what this experience is like. I'm here to inform you that I am involved in a countywide race for the position of county treasurer. You can find me on Facebook at Schwind for Treasurer, that's S-C-H-W-I-N-D. I'm running for treasurer for 3 reasons. Number one reason is that I'm qualified. I was educated at the College of Business at the University of Texas in Austin. And for the last 30 years, I have practiced the discipline of management accounting for a variety of free market, profit-making, entrepreneurial businesses. I am an independent practitioner, registered as an IRS tax preparer, and licensed by the State Board of Insurance for both personal and commercial risk instruments. I do financial reporting, accounting analysis, budget projections, contract negotiations, audit defense, and succession planning. I own my own practice. My clients know me by my personal name, which is Bill Schwind, SCHWIND. I would like to acknowledge the support I've received from all the corners of the county. It is gratifying to me to know that at election time we have no differences in either race or ethnic background. It's all about qualifications. So reason number 2 that I'm running is that the current treasurer has been in the treasurer's office for 31 years. I believe that it's time for a set of fresh, new eyes. I'm confident that with the breadth and depth of my experience in financial and commercial transactions, that I will be a benefit to the county's policy makers. Reason 3 is that I believe Guadalupe County is on the cusp of a surge in population, in business activity, and in governmental necessity, all of which have financial implications. I want a seat at the table for those future developments, and I want to thank you for your openness in this particular forum.
Thank you, Mr. Schwinn. Next signed up this evening is Michelle, and I apologize I can't read the remainder. Did you want to speak at the public hearing time, or okay, very good. Next up, Grumpy Azus.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I can't help to look at the YouTube video from the last 2 meetings. I had a call from City Councilman San Antonio, asked me if I looked at it. I said, no, frankly, I did not. Because I don't want to be entertained no more. Not noticing also the newspaper article that came out in reference to our previous city manager and the vote that took place. I was appalled to hear, or I'm sorry, to read that there is a feeling in there that the reason that happened because of hate. That came out of quotation from one of the city council members in the newspaper. The other thing is, Mr. Mayor, when I look at the hearing of resident, we're supposed to come out and speak to the council in general, not in one particular, not to take shots at the honorable council members of whatever decisions they make. Voice their opinion and sit down, not to take shots at residents in the city. As it was told to me today, it's really becoming a circus. It's fun to watch. I'm very insulted by that because I'm a resident of this city. I do a lot for the people. I understand, I could take it. But when they take shots at y'all, that's not acceptable. They took shots at me, and it's radical. I'm not going to lower myself to that. But the other thing is, I look, and what triggered me in the phone call I made today is regarding the Chamber of Commerce 2 representative that came and took everything they can at y'all. What they don't realize is this is the body that votes on the Chamber of Commerce contract. This is the exact people that will vote for that. If they represent our city, well, they're not representing you. And that's what I took. Maybe I ought to look at the tape again. My advice in that, do what San Antonio did. It's good to have a chamber, but you don't have to support them. They parted ways. The city of San Antonio is still a member of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, but there is no contracts, there is no funding. That was very disturbing, and that's my recommendation. I look at the money we spend, not only that on the contract, but on the building we're giving them, and all the services the taxpayer is paying for. I could go on and on and on, but I want to congratulate you, sir, for acting city manager. I wish you the very best. But what I want to close this, it's really enough, seriously enough. We have a good city. We need to move forward. Y'all need to unite. It's not coming just from me. It's coming from outside. They see how divided our city council is. We need to look, all the decisions you're going to make is not going to make me happy or make somebody else happy. You're going to make tough decisions. And that's what we look forward to. You make the tough decision, and then if it works, good. If it's not shame on you, is you correct it. It's a business. Running a city is a business. One more thing, please. I read on Facebook, and Facebook is destructive, by the way. I don't deal with it. I just tell them, you losers, get out of my face. But anyway. But I read in Facebook, it says that we need to form a committee. Okay, now here's the words. A committee to elect the new city manager. Well, guess what? I'm looking at 7 people up here, and you are the committee. It is your job to pick and select a city manager. It's not our job. It is your job. We don't want this to become a Fiesta, Texas, a circus. Please, enough of y'all making bad choices. That doesn't mean I made a recommendation, you follow through with it, but just think about it. And when I read that, it really disturbed me. I said, I thought we have that committee in place. I'm pleading to you, enough of this taking shots. And trust me, any of you sitting up here say things, guess who gets it? I will know about it, and from who. If it's not the same day, it's the following day. I have an open door. Everybody will pick up the phone, no grumpy, tell me who said what. But we want to move forward. And I'm begging you not to disagree in front of public with each other, and be cohesive, and let's build a good city. Taking a shot at you is not good. I thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jeff Womack. Mr. Womack.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Mr. James, Mr. Santee. Jeff Womack, 2944 Mineral Springs. A lot of things I could say tonight. Once again, just here to kind of keep an eye on things. And I noticed that Mr. Thompson's not here. 2 meetings ago, he requested formally to know, as a taxpayer of the city, where the $235,625 was going to come from. As a taxpayer, and with all the taxpayers behind me, I'm sure they would also like to know where that was coming from, because we are trying to move forward in the city, and well, sometimes we have to pay, and we have to take a couple of steps back. A $235,000 step back is quite considerable, and I think we all deserve to know where that's coming from and how we're going to pay for that. When we have cities like Schertz and Cibolo that are growing so dynamically and everything, a lot of times our tax base hasn't caught up to all the needs that we have. Our needs are many, and we see that every day. We see all the changes that are coming about in our city, and it's wonderful. Our new concrete here on Schertz Parkway, long overdue. Other things that are happening, the new park that's going in right there on Schertz Parkway, that's going to be exciting. But, what is the impact of our decisions? And I'd just like to request once again on behalf of Mr. Thompson and his request to find out where that money is coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Don Taylor. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought you was trying to make me feel bad when I came in, and I noticed that we had a proclamation on George Washington, and the mayor asked me, said, Don, didn't you make that first inauguration? It was the second inauguration, not the first.
You're right. You're right.
I appreciate being here, and the reason that I'm here, kind of really, to be honest about it, reluctant to come, but there was some statements made in the Express News and in the Herald and on the media, social media, and I'd like to address those. To kind of paraphrase them, they said that when the previous city manager came in, we were in total chaos. In fact, a previous councilman made a public statement that when Mr. Kessel took over, we lacked 2 weeks into going into bankruptcy. I spoke with the mayor about that. It's absolutely ridiculous. But I'm really here to address them, and I want to make it crystal clear. This has nothing to do about the previous city manager or for myself. But I do think it was a slap at the present 3 sitting councilmen that was there during that time, because they're the ones, the elected official in charge, and nothing came up from 2005, 2010 that I was here that we had any problem with finances or anything going wrong. And I kind of look up there and I look down here, and here's Mr. Scagliotta, the PhD. Mr. Edwards is financial manager, and our mayor works for a large company. I think they would have seen that if something was going wrong. But I'd like to address just quickly, if I may. After I was here 1 year, council requested that we do a study that have all of the folks come in and tell us what they wanted, what they saw was projects. We did that. Selected the top 4 or 5 that we're going to do. One's a library, rec center, and some infrastructure. And then to do that, to sell the bonds, we had to have a bonding company come in and do a rate study. Moody's came in. And I'm sure they will probably remember, after the rate study was done, the city of Schertz received the highest bond rating in its history. Matter of fact, one of the highest bond ratings in the entire Metrocom, higher than the city of San Antonio. Now let's move on down to some other things that was in there. I know after we sold the bonds, that was put in general fund, and I don't know where somebody's mind this come from, but we took that money, put it in general fund, and a few months later, after going over, I told our finance director, I said, I want you to move that out of the general fund into a regular bond account by itself. And in doing so, I contacted bond counsel and our auditors, and they all concurred, yes, that's what it should be. So the next year, if you didn't know how to read a financial statement, you may look at that and say, well, here general fund is down this many millions. But if you knew about municipal accounting, you'd go over to the next page and see where that was just transferred over. Next thing I'd move down real quickly is a statement was made that our revenues, the revenue reserve funds was almost bankrupt. In 2008 and 2009, council wanted to do some things that we had no bond money for, wasn't there. They voted unanimously, take that out of the revenues, the reserve fund. $1 million was taken out to buy the property where the new library sits and the new rec center. Another several $100,000 was to buy the property where the post office sits. That's agreement we made with the post office that if we bought the land, they'd build us a new post office. The next thing was approximately $800,000 to buy the new soccer fields down here. And I would tell you today that if we had not done that, in fact, that was Mayor Carpenter's recommendation. Had we not done that, I would venture to say that those soccer fields, they had cost us twice that. I think that was a good move. but I would like to make, hopefully this doesn't shock anyone, after we took all the money out, we never at any time dropped below the minimums for our fund that was set by council. Let me say that again. We never dropped below one day the minimums that this council set for the reserve fund. Move on to another thing that I heard about economic development. I was a little bit shocked. Did a little checking from 2005 to 2010 was the largest growth in this city up until tonight. More commercial permits were issued from 2005 to 2010 than at any time in this city's history. Now, I certainly don't take any credit, and I'm sure if Mr. Kessel was here, he'd say the same thing. Council gets that credit. They're the elected officials. They're the ones that are responsible, and you should, but you shouldn't at the same time have to take a slap. I would recommend, Mayor, if y'all could, and you certainly can, develop a policy that when council makes a statement to the press, that they have some type of guidelines to go by. Y'all do have the leverage that if they make something that isn't true, you can bring them back in and say, that was a false statement. Because it's embarrassing to y'all when that's done. And these that I've listed are absolutely false. Now, let me suggest this. If y'all have any doubt to what I say, the mayor knows me well enough to know I check before I come up here. But if there's any doubt whatsoever, put this on an agenda item at the next agenda. Invite your bond counsel, invite your auditors up, and ask these questions that I just went over today and see what they'll tell you. Because like I said, I know Mayor Carpenter knows, I've already talked with those folks and I already know the answers. That's where it came from. So I appreciate that, and I say that is I think, and I have a lot of pride in Schertz, and it was a pleasure working with this council. Like I said, 3 of y'all are up there, and I thought it was a great time. And when Mr. Kessel took over, he took over one of the strongest financial cities in the entire Metroplex. That's a fact. I'm not saying he didn't do a great job. I'm just saying up until that point, I can only speak from the time that I was here. That's all that I can speak to. And I appreciate that. Thank you all.
Thank you. We have a few public hearings this evening, and I would like to go to those, as we may have some guests here that are interested parties. So if council doesn't have an objection, I'd like to go to the public hearing so the public can be heard and potentially move on if they wish. So the first one we have is item number 13, Ordinance 17S50. And I'm sorry, Mr. James, if I was on my game, I would have let you know in advance that I was going to do this so staff could have been prepared. But Ordinance 17S50, an ordinance of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Schertz, Texas, establishing a Building and Standards Commission, providing a criminal penalty, providing for publication, and providing an effective date. And as we do for all of these, we'll have a presentation from our staff with regard to the item. We'll open the item up for public hearing, and then after the public has been heard, the council will take up the matter. So, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Emily Groby with the Planning and Community Development Department. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about the Building and Standards Commission creation. So during the January 9th City Council, 2 changes were requested to our original proposed language of the Building and Standards Commission. The first was to alter all of the number call-outs in both Exhibit A and Exhibit B. They were currently just said or shown as just numerical values. We went through the other codes and city ordinances and saw that to be consistent with all of those, we actually did need to do that change to spell it out. So as you can see here, we originally had it as 30 days, and we went through and made all of the changes in Exhibit A and Exhibit B to spell it out as 30 and then have in parentheses the numerical value. The second request was to distinguish between business days and calendar days. With our previous proposal, it just said, 30 days, something like that. When we went and looked at all of the other city ordinances and codes, I could not find one that distinguished between business or calendar days. It's kind of just, as we have discussed, if there's no distinction made, it's the assumption that it is business days. I apologize, calendar days. Sorry. So that change was not made. That way we were consistent with all the rest of our codes and ordinances. So just to reiterate, the only change that was made between the January 9th and tonight's Exhibit A and B in the packet was the spelling out of the numerical value. Additionally, during the January 9th City Council, there was discussion about council members wanting to meet with staff to discuss the Building and Standards Commission creation. So we did have those individual meetings, and two things were brought up as potential changes that I wanted to talk about tonight. So just to be clear, these changes were not made. They were just talked about, and I wanted to talk about them tonight to see if that's something that y'all want to explore. The first one was to alter the number of members present in order to hear a case, and then the other was to alter the qualifier that states to be a commission member, you must be a resident of Schertz. So to explain that a little further, currently in Exhibit B, the subsection for members, number, appointment, qualifications, it reads, all cases shall be heard by at least 4 members. During that meeting, there was discussion that with it qualifying at least 4 members, there was the option or, the relevance that there might be a tie at certain cases, both 2 in favor, 2 opposed. And the suggestion was to try to mitigate that by requiring at least 5 members be present to hear every case. As a caveat to that, the commission in its current proposal would include 5 members and the possibility of 2 alternates. So by adjusting that all cases be heard by 5 members, the possibility to have a tie diminishes. However, that would mean that at every meeting, all regular members would be present, or we would recommend appointing 2 alternates. That way we have 7 members that we can call upon to hear each case. The second potential change that was brought up, also in Exhibit B under members, number, appointment, qualifications, it reads, if a resident with the above criteria cannot be found, then the City Council may appoint another resident of their choosing to the commission. During that meeting, it was discussed that stipulating that the commission members have to be residents, it may make it more difficult to find the qualified individuals as specified in our code. So there was discussion about changing the language to read, if a person with the above criteria cannot be found, then the City Council may appoint another person of their choosing to the commission. So I wanted to give you another background, again, on the Building and Standards Commission and why we're trying to create this. So our current proposal is being created using Local Government Code Chapter 54 and Chapter 214. It would be a commission of 5 members to be appointed by council for a 2-year term, possibility to appoint 2 alternates. We would recommend that they have registered design professional experience in architectural experience, mechanical and plumbing engineering, structural engineering, electrical engineering, and fire protection engineering. And then that caveat, if a resident cannot be found meeting the above criteria, council may appoint another resident. We feel that even though the criteria of the members that we're looking for is pretty strict, it's very important for us to try to find those members. And we do feel it is important to have them be residents, at least go out first round trying to talk to these kind of professionals and see who's a resident and who's not, and see if we can get those qualifiers as residents as well. So specifically, the commission would hear cases relative to ordinance violations for the preservation of public safety, relating to the materials or methods used to construct a building or improvement, relating to the fire safety of building or improvement, relating to dangerously damaged or deteriorated buildings, relating to conditions caused by accumulations of refuse, vegetation, and relating to a building code or to the condition, use, or appearance of property in the city of Schertz. So as a follow-up, they could order the repair within a fixed period of buildings found to be in violation of an ordinance, require the demolition of a structure, declare a building substandard, order in appropriate cases the immediate removal of persons or property found on private property, issue orders or directives to any peace officer, or determine the amount and duration of civil penalty. So our goals in this is to provide an appropriate outlet for appeals to building and fire code decisions. So as we currently have those stated, if you wanted to appeal a building code or fire code decision, they would be going to our Board of Adjustment, which per state law, Board of Adjustment should only be hearing zoning cases. So we don't really have an appropriate board at this time for those appeals to go to. So the hope in the Building and Standards Commission creation would have an appropriate board per state law. To ensure safety of property owners, adjacent property owners, and Schertz residents from substandard buildings, we would also hope that it would promote rehabilitation of standard structures, provide an opportunity for property owners with a substandard structure and outlet for public hearing, and provide a more efficient and cost-effective means of reviewing and obtaining a decision of rehabilitation measures, demolition. So y'all have seen these slides before. They're the changes. On this slide, it's the Exhibit A, where in the building and building regulations, we would be replacing Board of Appeals with Buildings and Standards Commission. Same thing with fire prevention and protection, replacing Board of Appeals with Building and Standards Commission. And then within the nuisance article, we would be replacing Board of Adjustment with Building and Standards Commission, and then changing Director of Development Services to City Manager. And that's it.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Next item that we have on the, I'm sorry, not the next item, but the next thing we do here is we hold the public hearing. So at this time, anybody that would like to address the City Council with regard to this particular item may come forward and do so. We ask that you limit commentary to approximately 3 minutes. I've got a little bit of leeway as the chair if you need a little more time, and that you state your name and address if you do want to address the City Council on this one when you come forward. So at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing. Anybody that would like to come forward and speak on this may do so at this time.
Richard Jevitt, 2550 Chasefield Drive, Schertz. Just a real quick question, I guess, and I approached it to one of the council members to just get an understanding of how exactly that works. If we have a code enforcement organization right now set up, certain things have to relate to these particular codes to be built, whatever they may be. So what we're saying now is by creating this organization, and hey, it might be the best thing, I don't know, but how would that affect the code's I guess the code ordinance responsibility and the marshal's office and everybody else that's involved in that, and the engineering staff that we already have, saying that this is the way the item is supposed to be created, made, or whatever it is? Wouldn't that kind of be a duplication? And if that's not the case, does this group actually go out and determine that something is not to code? Just a matter of explanation, maybe. Thank you.
Very good. We will address that after we close the public hearing. All right, anyone else? All right, doesn't appear that I have any takers. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time, and we'll open it up for staff. Can you address Richard's comments, questions for him very quickly, and then we'll open it up to council?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So the way that our code enforcement officers are currently doing their job, that would not change with the creation of this Building and Standards Commission. Not sure if y'all remember the workshop that, when Thomas came up with code enforcement and explained what currently happens is if they see a lawn that has high vegetation, for example, they would go out and they would try to contact the property owner, try to get that resolved. If they can't get it resolved, typically what happens is it goes to municipal court. If that doesn't get a resolution, then we would have the option to bring it to the Building and Standards Commission for that commission to try to get the property owner to be in compliance. It's kind of another step to allow our residents a chance for their voice to be heard on their case. As far as being in compliance, so say that we find a substandard substandard structure. Our chief building official would go out, examine the structure, determine if it truly is substandard or not, and then they would make, the chief building official would make that case to the Building and Standards Commission, explaining all of the facts on why that property is substandard, or that building is substandard, and why it needs to be brought into compliance. So it's not necessarily the Building and Standards Commission going out and evaluating the sites, but staff members would present a case explaining the structure of that building, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Council, questions? Mr. Edwards.
So I do have one question. So if we can't find qualified individuals, what we'll choose to do at that point, we can appoint anyone. Can that be anyone from the surrounding area as well? Because we did say, you said residents of Schertz, but we can find someone from surrounding communities too.
So with our current proposal, they would have to be a resident of Schertz. If you couldn't find someone with these 5 criteria, then you could appoint any resident in Schertz. The council member that brought up, well, it might be difficult to find, you know, a resident with that experience, made the suggestion of changing it to a person instead of a resident. That way we could find other individuals. On the staff side, we are still staying with our recommendation that we keep it with a resident, and then say 3 or 4 months down the line, if we can't find any kind of candidates, we can come back and make the change for it to be a person or a property owner, kind of whatever directive y'all give us at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, this is final reading. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 17S50.
Second. I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Crawford. Any other comments or questions for council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, council.
All right, next item we have on the agenda this evening is item number 14, Ordinance 18S07, an ordinance by the City Council of City of Schertz, Texas, amending the official zoning map by zoning approximately 7 acres of land to single-family residential District 1, or R1. Evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item that you have before you is a zoning, so this area has not been zoned previously. This is the area in Homestead that was brought into the city via the boundary agreement adjustment with the city of Cibolo that the City Council approved in November of 2017. So we are coming forward with the zoning on this. The rest of Homestead is zoned Planned Development District. However, what city staff is proposing, since as it's coming into the city, we have to have zoning on it kind of immediately, is the R1 zoning, which is our standard single-family zoning district. And the developer has expressed an interest in some possible revisions to his PDD, and so they'll be coming back potentially in the future and picking up that land as they do a revision. Public hearing notice was published in the San Antonio Express News on January 24th, and 3 public hearing notices were mailed out to surrounding property owners within 200 feet on December 29th before the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting that took place on January 10th. So in total, it's approximately 7 acres of property. You can see it highlighted here in the gray on the same graphic we showed whenever we did the boundary adjustment. Here's the noticing map to give you, again, a little bit of information on it. It is actually 2 separate tracts. There's a division right here between them. So city staff has evaluated this. The zoning that we're proposing is compliant with our comprehensive land use plan, which identifies this area as single-family residential. Again, as we've talked through that one, it involves a mixture of single-family uses along with limited commercial. The area, as you can see from the previous item within the planned development district of Homestead, this is a very large open space lot that's being used for open space and drainage. Right about here is an area that's designated for townhomes, so there's a little bit of frontage that will have to be picked up. And then I believe most of this area, maybe a little bit of it touches these back lots. But for the most part, it's going to be roadway. So there's not really any buildable lots that are even impacted by the swap, as we discussed in November when the council approved the boundary adjustment. So again, the Planning and Zoning Commission had a public hearing on January 10th and provided a unanimous recommendation of approval. City staff also recommends approval of this item.
Very good. Thank you, sir. So this is also set for public hearing. Same instructions as before, and I'm going to open the public hearing at this time. Anybody who would like to address the council may come forward and do so. Does anybody would like to address the council on 18S07? Doesn't appear that I have any takers. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. We'll move on. Council, questions?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like
Edwards?
to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 18S07.
Second.
A motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Davis. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Thank you very much. All right. Next up this evening, ordinance 18S08. An ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending Part 3 Schertz Code of Ordinances, the Unified Development Code, or UDC, Article 9, Section 21.9.9, Tree Preservation and Mitigation, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. It's all yours, sir.
So the item that you have before you is a staff-initiated amendment to the Unified Development Code. This one specifically is dealing with some cleanup in the tree preservation and mitigation section. The last time that this section was really looked at was in 2010, so it has been many, many years. It's very much due. Staff has had to do some interpretations over the years on this section because of some inconsistencies in the language and some interpretations that we've had to make. And there have been a number of projects in recent years that have had some difficulties both in the clarity and understanding of our tree ordinance as well as some compliance items where it's kind of one of those, yeah, I hear what you want to do and it makes sense. Our code just doesn't let you. And so, staff has heard the message from council loud and clear that we're looking for flexibility and clarity in our codes. And so the item that we're presenting to you this evening, we're hoping accomplishes that goal. So going through this item, staff looked over the entire section. We didn't want to deviate too much from how it was originally set up, but definitely wanted to provide that much needed clarity and some additional increase in flexibility. So the first items that were changed for this section involved the introduction of the term class at the end of protected and heritage trees. So as council may know, we do regulate trees that are greater than 8 inches. We call them protected trees, and so that'll be 8 to right under 24, and then 24 and greater is a heritage class tree. There were a number of references to protected, when we talk about protected species versus protected tree types versus protected as a whole trees. And so there was some clarity issues there. So everywhere where you see in the ordinance now protected referring to protected class tree, it says protected class, same thing with heritage class. The next update was increasing the measurement DBH, which is diameter at breast height, which is an industry standard at 4.5 feet. It's 4 in our current code. We're proposing to go 4.5, which is the industry standard, and it also matches some recent state legislation regarding tree preservation and mitigation that was passed this last session. Additionally, we created an exemption from preservation requirements only for heritage class trees located within utility easements. So the current code exempts just protected class trees, so 8 to 23.99 inch trees that are located within utility easements are exempt from both preservation and mitigation. We're adding in that heritage class trees are also exempt from preservation, but not mitigation. And the reason behind that is there are utilities. When we think of utilities and where they go, there are certain utilities which are just dictated in a specific place, such as sewer or drainage. They go to the low. You can't really mess with the grade too much to get around that. And so, unfortunately, there's a lot of great trees along banks of existing drainage channels that maybe are substandard, et cetera. As I'm sure Dr. Pam will make it up here during the public hearing. She can give you a great example of where this exists on a site that she's working on developing now. And so looking at that, staff really wanted to make sure that we're kind of capturing that as capturing that sentiment into this, knowing that I don't always get to pick where my easements go, and sometimes there's trees there, and so should I have to pay for that if it's just where it has to be? Now, the reason it's not exempt from mitigation as well is because there is some amount of control that developers may have as you develop land over where other easements go, such as utility easements. So when we develop a residential subdivision, there's always a 10-foot utility easement on the front of every lot. that developer was to skew that road just enough to keep it out of the road, but in the easement, if we exempted it from mitigation as well, if we exempt it from the mitigation fees as well, then it's kind of free reign to clear a lot of what you wanted, and that's not what we're shooting for. One of the items that I will cover at the very end of this is the waiver portion that we're introducing, which will allow a waiver to this in certain situations. We created an exemption from preservation and mitigation requirements for protected class trees that are on that are of a species listed on our undesirable trees list. So in our landscaping section of the UDC, we have a whole list of trees that we say these are undesirable, and we really don't know that we want you to plant these in Schertz. It doesn't make sense for us to then charge mitigation or count it against their preservation requirements when it's a tree that we would not encourage you to plant in the first place. Next, we created an exemption for the preservation and mitigation requirements for protected class and heritage class trees located on property with an existing one-family and two-family dwelling that's occupied. So the concept behind this, and this is very much a new one for us, is that if you have an existing residence that you live in or someone lives in, and you have to remove a tree, let's say it's, I'm coming in with my swimming pool and I've got a very wooded lot. I've got to take out a couple trees to put my swimming pool in. A couple of them are 8 or 9 inches. Staff feels you shouldn't have to be penalized for mitigation to remove those trees because it's kind of your lot. And for the most part, the way that a lot of our code is written is in the favor of that individual resident who's now living in their home. This would not apply to large development where the homes are not yet built and you're clearing rough lots so that you can build brand new homes. You are still required to comply with the mitigation requirements. This only applies to those existing lots with homes as we go forward. City of San Antonio also has this requirement just for one-family lots. And then we also picked this up because the state law additions that came out say that we cannot charge a fee for the removal of trees that are less than 10 inches DBH. So our normal is 8, but they've bumped it up to 10 on 1- and 2-family lots, so that are occupied with a structure. Next, we introduced a change in references for consistency. So there's a couple references to Director of Parks and Recreation and Community Services. Much like most of our other amendments that we've come through recently on, we've changed that to City Manager or his or her designee, just as positions change or people are vacant, as things get retitled. We don't have any of that mix-up as we go forward. Next, we modified the minimum replacement tree size from 3.5 inches to 2.5 inches because our new planting size for new trees on any development is a minimum of 2.5 inches, so it made sense to have it uniformed all the way through. We updated the tree preservations credit section to provide additional clarity on how tree credits are calculated and used. And tree credits, for the most part, are going to only be assigned to commercial and multifamily lots. And so what it is when you have existing trees that you're saving that are located within appropriate buffers, then you can use those against your new planting requirements. So for example, on a standard commercial project that's not on a secondary or primary arterial, so something on a collector class road, you're required to plant trees at a ratio of 1 per 50 linear feet. So if you're saving a couple nice big trees, then that will offset that planting requirement and you may not have to plant any trees. Because again, we're saving those nice heritage oaks, the nice protected elms that are located along the fronts of those lots. Next, we deleted the section for criteria for tree removal permit. Going this route, especially with adding in the removal of trees or the exemption of trees from the single-family and two-family lots, there isn't a permit that people come in and just say, I need to remove this tree. Because if it's already dead and dying, there's provisions in the code which address that. But nobody just comes in and says, I'm just going to go cut down trees. Or really, we haven't had that yet. It's always with another permit. It's a clearing and grading permit. It's a building permit. It's a accessory structure. It's something else. And so we don't ever issue these as a standalone permit. It's always rolled in with another permit, so there was no need to have this whole section on criteria for approval. And then finally, we created an administrative waiver to mitigation fees for heritage class trees, again, in specific circumstances that are identified. as well as an ability for an administrative waiver to our 25% minimum preservation. And the idea behind this is really that flexibility. So with the 25% preservation, we have seen scenarios where I have a 15-acre industrial site that I want to build on. I have one protected tree on it, and it is right in the middle, and it's a 9-inch oak tree. Because the land was cleared for farming years ago, and I just kind of have some scrub brush along the fence lines, but there's no real substantive trees. And so under our current ordinance, there's not a way around that. So if it's right in the middle where your building's going to go, you basically have to put a courtyard in or something. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to us, and so we put in this provision to allow the ability to waive that, because that industrial site is going to end up putting back hundreds of inches based on our landscaping requirements, which are pretty heavy. And so saving that 1 or 2 trees that are just really killing the site for development, we felt this is a good spot to introduce that flexibility. And then on the heritage class trees, in certain circumstances, we feel it's appropriate to exempt out the mitigation fees as well. So again, as I talked earlier, we added heritage trees, an exemption to the preservation requirements when they're located within utility easements, but we also have the ability to add a waiver into that if there is an extenuating circumstance. So one of the projects that we have in right now is a veterinary clinic that's looking to be placed on I-35, and there is a drainage channel that's existed for years and years and years along the back part of this property. There are, I think, 4 pretty nice heritage trees just right up on the edge of the bank. The channel as it exists today is substandard, and the property as a whole floods anytime we get extremely heavy rains. So no matter what, in order to develop that property, you have to improve that channel. Now, the project engineer has looked at rerouting the channel, going underground with it, doing heavy concrete improvements to try to reduce the channel spacing, but nothing they can come up with has yielded an ability to really save these trees. And so it's situations like that where there's no other option. That drainage has to be there because it's regional drainage from a number of other lots that staff feels those are the kinds of things that we want to be able to provide this waiver to say, yeah, I get it. To develop this lot, these trees have to come out. We know you're not just clear-cutting them to get rid of them. You just can't do things with the property really until you do those improvements. And so it doesn't make sense to charge them $40,000 or $50,000 in mitigation fees to take out trees so that they can improve the property when no matter what you do, you have to do that improvement. You have to take those trees out even if you want to save them. So again, some of the general criteria that we've put into here is that the removal of the tree will not have a significant negative impact on erosion, soil stability, flow, surface waters, protection of adjacent trees or windbreaks. The requested waiver does not violate the intent of the tree preservation and mitigation section of the UDC. That strict interpretation of the provisions of this section would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other nearby properties in the same zoning district or with the same land use that have to comply with those same provisions. So again, these unique geographic conditions don't exist on every property. We need to be able to be flexible to take that into account. And then finally, that a reasonable effort to preserve the trees has been made and reasonable alternatives have been evaluated and determined to not be feasible. So with that, this item was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission a number of times. We had a couple workshops, one on December 13th and one on January 10th, just to really work through a lot of these issues before it was actually presented to them for action on January 24th, where they offered a recommendation of approval with a 5-to-1 vote. The dissenting vote didn't give a specific reason as to why they were dissenting. So, with that, city staff recommends approval of this UDC amendment in an effort to provide clarity and flexibility into our code. So, with that, I'll...
Good. Thank you, sir. Mr. James?
A couple of things maybe to point out to City Council in the audience. One of the things that Bryce mentioned, just to be clear, is the administrative waiver is a waiver that's approved at a staff level by the city manager or his or her designee. So this will generally fall to the senior planner and/or the director of planning and community development. The proposed change also includes a provision that an applicant can appeal that decision to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So what would typically happen is if staff says, we're not comfortable approving a waiver, we don't think it makes sense, they have the recourse to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning tends to deal with site and development type things. So we feel they're best suited based on their knowledge to do that. But the thing I'll say really is, just so this is clear, that this provision to allow for an administrative waiver is a significant paradigm shift from where we've been with regard to the Code of Ordinances. One thing that we've told folks before is there really is no discretion given to staff in the Unified Development Code. It lays it out black and white. There's a lot of good to that at times. You're not beholden to the whims of staff. The drawback is we may all sit there and say, yeah, it doesn't make sense, and staff says, but I can't help you with it. And so this is really a first foray into that. The assumption is I think that typically as these things go, staff tends to take a fairly conservative approach with it. They don't tend to willy-nilly, knowing particularly that there's an appeal process to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So there's that recourse. But I just want to make that clear that this is a big change in how we sort of do business with regard to that. Council may or may not be okay with it, may or may not have a comfort level, but certainly this is probably one of those that likely we would probably report back to P&Z and or council to say, here's how this is working, here's how many of these we're giving. And we would not anticipate a lot of these to come through, very, very rare, but where we have that circumstance, it provides for it. So.
And I'll chime in on that. P&Z has also asked, if this is approved, that we come back and regularly report to them about the number of waivers we're receiving, the number we're processing. Staff has taken, especially as you all have seen over the last probably year and a half, a really hard look at our UDC as we start to really roll through these updates. And one of the things that traditionally kind of staff's looked at is, let's just fix it once and be done. We're having a little bit different mentality of, let's fix it and get it right, but be open to change, be open to looking at it even, 4 or 5 months down the road to say, did we really get it right? Do we need to tweak it a little bit? If we do, let's bring it back forward.
Very good. All right, next thing we have on this is conducting our public hearing. So same instructions as before. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and anybody that would like to address the council may come forward and do so at this time.
Hi, good evening. My name is Michelle Bammel. My address is 6695 Tri-County Parkway. I'm the owner of Westridge Pet Hospital, and I'm here tonight because this project or this amendment would be near and dear to my heart because I want to be the face of what a waiver would look like. I have owned Westridge Pet Hospital since 2011, and when I bought it, it was actually called Tri-County Parkway. It's on the corner of 3009 and Tri-County Parkway. And it has grown in size exponentially, and I need to expand. So I've decided that what I want to do is actually build a sister clinic, which led me to the purchase of a vacant lot, which is 22525 IH 35 North. It's a couple lots north of the Randolph Brooks on that side of the road, if you know where that is. And we did our due diligence. My contractor, I paid for a engineer to look at the lot, make sure he didn't see any problems with it. For the record, I have an SBA loan, so I had to meet all the requirements that an SBA loan could do. It was not marked as in a floodplain at the time. So we purchased the lot, a little over $500,000, and proceeded with development. Shortly after we got into it a little bit and started figuring out where we were going to put the building, we discovered we had to deal with a U.S. waterway in the back. And for those of you that don't ever look at drainage culverts, because who does, there happens to be one right adjacent to my lot. It's massive, and all the water from I-35 drains under I-35 and drains through that culvert through the back of my property. There's a ditch, it's a dry ditch, across the back of my property. And normally it's dry, except for when it floods. And over the years, long before probably I was born, somebody built kind of a wall on the property behind me, and I think probably the idea was to kind of divert the water from eroding their property, things you don't know when you buy things. But now the water can't go anywhere else. And it's a U.S. waterway, so we can't touch that. So we have to widen the culvert to allow the waters coming off I-35 to have somewhere to go, because it's not wide enough. It's just not wide enough for the amount of water that flows through there. So the solution to that is to widen the culvert, the ditch in the back. But the problem is there are these amazing, beautiful oaks on the back, which were my pride and joy. I remember when we bought it, we sat around and had glasses of champagne and talked about the beautiful trees in the back. I'm also a tree hugger, and I hired tree doctors to come look at fungal spores and fungal bodies on the trees at my house. So know that I cried and saw dreams of employee benches underneath the oak trees gone and devastated whenever I heard the news, and I told my engineer, over my dead body, find another way. And he looked, and I mean, long before Bryce ever asked me if we'd looked, we had already looked. And so I was presented with the fact that the only option was to remove the trees, which I swallowed hard, and proceeded. And then we found out then that the mitigation fee for that was going to be $43,000. And I'm a veterinarian, my husband's a police officer, we aren't wealthy corporate people. Even then it probably wouldn't matter, but that is also almost a half of my contingency money before I've ever put a shovel in the ground. So I'm like, I mean, what do? Do you sign away half my contingency money before I've ever, I mean, there's gonna be stud problems, there's gonna be something that's gonna come up, and I hate to give it all away right now. So I started making phone calls. I actually called Mr. James and explained my situation and said, what other options do I have? And he said, none, really. There are no other options. I'm like, can I plant trees on my existing property? Can I do something else to kind of offset that sum? And there is nothing written in the code for that. And that kind of led to further digging. Then Bryce's office wants to know, well, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? And my engineers talked, and we've looked. There is nothing else. There is no other way. As much as I want to keep the oak trees, they are fantastic. And we'll be planting, I think we have to plant a bunch of extra trees because we have I-35 frontage road. So like he said, we will be replacing the trees, and it's awful to see them being cut down, and I'm probably going to make benches with the wood or something because it makes me cry. But anyway, I just want you to know that it's real, and there needs to be, I want the spirit of the law, of the code to live. I want that spirit to live. No one wants to live where there's no trees and it's just a city of concrete. But there also needs to be an allowance for when it doesn't fit. Square peg, round hole. Can't make it work. Like the heritage oak in the center of where the building needs to go. What do you do when that happens? And there's just nothing for that. There's nothing written for that. It's just not even a rational thing. There needs to be, like, what do you do when that doesn't work? Or, in 2010, whenever y'all wrote it, you said, well, we'll come back if there's problems. Or in 4 months, we'll come back if there's problems. Well, here's a problem. It makes it really difficult for small business owners to try to do something whenever it's such a, there just needs to be an allowance, a reasonable process of allowance, just like you're talking about for the code, when they break the code, you need to have the process in place. Well, what do you do? Well, this is what happens. What do you do when you can't make it work? So I just wanted to be the face of it, know that it's it affects real people. It's not like we were blind to it. We did all our due diligence, and we want to build a great place so people can bring their dogs and cats to be healed and have good things. But we also ask for a little bit of common sense to prevail and to allow for this waiver, because it is real life and it affects me. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And thanks again.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Michael Dalla, 9120 East FM 1518 North. The whole time I've been on planning and zoning, going on about 6.5 years now, there's two things that have been really sacrosanct that we've been incredibly reluctant and almost absolute in looking to change. That's the tree ordinance and that's signs. Over the last 6 months or so, we've had several new members come on board. We've changed a bit as a body, and we're starting to see the benefits of being a little bit more flexible in creating more opportunity for some of these unique situations. As Bryce said, sometimes the UDC, it's black and white, and there's some things that just make sense that we ought to be able to do. In going through this discussion with Bryce, as we met before our P&Z meetings and at the presentations, the big concern was that we, do it in a way that we're flexible, but in a way that is not subject to, regular and wanton abuse. I think Bryce did an excellent job on crafting the language to where we can provide some flexibility for these unique situations to encourage people to come in and develop their businesses in our community. And I think the vote of 5-1, shows that we felt pretty comfortable about what was coming forward with that. So, ask you guys to consider strongly supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Doesn't look like I have any other takers. Go ahead and close the public hearing and open up to council.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Davis.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 18S08.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Davis. I have a second from Dr. Kaiser. Other comments, questions from council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask a couple of questions, Bryce. And by the way, Sadie and Gidget say hello, so you do a good job. I know that. Have you guys thought about giving to some consideration to maybe a reharvest and reestablishing program or some language like that in the tree ordinance? Because if you were to harvest a tree and move it on that property as well, it would also maintain the value. It may be too large to do, but maybe some of the smaller trees can be harvested and moved to another location. The reason why I'm bringing that up is because we also have the church on 3009 that has a huge tree lot, and there may be some benefit to them, because if you're saying every 50 feet that they have to have a tree planted, if they decided to reharvest some of those trees and utilize them on their property still, that would save them a lot of money. I had to back away from a couple of pieces of property in Schertz myself because of this tree ordinance. It was just too expensive to go out and do it on your own. So I would strongly support this, but I would like to see you guys go a little bit further, Mr. Dollar, and say maybe we could look at adding some language about reharvesting or reestablishing those trees, those same trees on that property. You can move them around some.
So we do allow people to move the trees. So if you move it and you're not chopping it down, then that's almost the same as the tree still being there. The problem is reasonably, in my understanding from our tree folks and some landscape architects and our parks department, is some of the smaller protected class, the things that are 12 inches less, can be done. It's still a little pricey. Once you get beyond that, it starts getting extremely expensive as well, almost cost prohibitively expensive. You probably all have seen a number of videos or things about big trees being moved. I know there's a real famous one for one of the engineering firms down in San Antonio built a new office, had to move a tree. Part of that is saving the trees, part of that is ordinances in general. And so again, they do serve a good purpose to make sure that we're protecting those good trees, but also providing reasonable accommodation. And that's a lot of this too, is, if it's $6,000 or $8,000 for me to remove the tree versus $50,000 or $50,000 to have somebody come in and move it, because it's those big trees. You're digging out these huge items. They bring in these big inflatable, well, not even spades. These ones they'll move by hand and hook up to a dozer, and basically like the same concept of how they, put the blocks on the pyramid, roll them across beams, and it just takes a long time.
So maybe if I may, Councilman, too, because you touched on the property of the church that's sort of heavily wooded. To be clear, what staff did not make adjustments to, and this is a question that we've talked to council before, is our ordinance for a lot that's heavily wooded, particularly of protected class trees, it is very, very expensive, even with the ability to relocate trees, even with the credit that we're now giving for those trees that are preserved, to some degree inherently for parking, even if you try to do tree islands, even if you try to save them where you can, often with regard to the grading that's necessary. So just to be clear for council, those heavily wooded lots, we still anticipate a very, very substantial tree mitigation requirement. So, for instance, the autumn wind, or not autumn winds, the
Revolution.
Legacy.
Yeah, sorry.
That was what, about $200,000?
Over $200,000.
Over $200,000. That's sort of a mitigation requirement. It may be slightly less, but it is likely still to occur on those types of lots. We have not made changes to address those, just to be clear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Bryce.
We got anyone else? Mr. Larson.
Well, first I wanted to say I think y'all did an exceptional job on crafting these changes. I'm probably on the extreme one end up here on council. I don't think it goes anywhere near far enough to relieving some of the stresses that business owners and people looking to invest in Schertz. But it looks like y'all put a lot of thought into making sure that we have some common sense opportunities to find the middle of the road when it's necessary. And so thank you for the hard work that you've done. I just wanted to point out it's not easy to go through these and to find the right balance. And so I think, obviously we'll find out when real life happens. I think you found a great balance here, so thank you.
Anyone else? I do have a motion and a second. If there isn't anything else, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've gone through the public hearing items that we have before us, and I'm going to go back to our regular order of business. And that involves a workshop, and that is an update on the status of Fire Station number 3. Good evening, Chief.
Evening, Mayor, Council. We're excited to be here tonight to give you an update on the status where Fire Station 3 currently stands. I'm happy to at least report tonight that we own the land for Fire Station 3. We've closed on it. It's located at 1518 in Lower Seguin, right across from the Crossvine neighborhood. Right now we're about 75% done on the design phase with our architects. Going through this process. The site plan has had to be revised a couple of times, and the biggest reason for that is we discovered there's some large heritage trees, the largest one being, I believe, 54 inches. And so we've had to move our site around a little bit to be sure that we saved those trees. This right here is just showing the kind of zoomed out view of where that Fire Station 3 location is from the zoomed out view. Next one, this is just looking at it from the front from Lower Seguin, and that's the large tree right there. And then this is just looking down at the intersection of Lower Seguin and 1518 from the front of their property. At this time, you know, our projected pricing and construction costs have been coming in higher than we've expected. So that's why we've been a little bit delayed at this point, trying to get everything going for Fire Station 3. We've been working closely with our partners at Byrne Construction and BRW Architects to get a project that we can bring to you that is, within budget. At this time, since we're only about 75% done on the design phase, that means Byrne doesn't have all of the information they need to give us a final price. And so we feel like, as we move closer towards that 100% completion in the design phase, that will help bring the cost down a little bit once we get to that 100% mark in the design phase. Also, just wanted to mention that, BRW come to us back in November requesting some additional compensation due to all the redesign cost. So moving the site, flipping the site, scooting the site back, just some different things that they had come to us requesting some additional compensation. During that time, we had just told them that, that was going to be something that BRW would have to have discussions with the city management team about, and those have been occurring several times since then over the past couple of months. The contract states that any cost-cutting measures to get the project within budget are, not reimbursable, and so that's why there's been some ongoing discussions back and forth as to, what was for cost-cutting, what was for, saving the trees. So there's been some foundation changes, mechanical changes in the building, things like that. So those have been part of the discussions with the city management team and BRW. We feel like we've got an agreement in place now with them, and we hope to finalize it by Friday. And then that would allow us to kind of restart everything, hopefully on Monday, kind of get everything back on track. We've, reduced the scope of the project due to the escalating construction costs, so we've had to continue to look at our project and make some decisions based on those construction costs coming in high. We are using a construction manager at risk project method. The best part about that method is we know the price up front, and so that allows us to come to you with a project that's within budget up front instead of going out for bids and then coming in too high and then having to go back out and redo it all again. So that construction manager at risk is nice to know up front where we stand and that we've got a project in budget. We are in the process now of revising the design schedule so that we can get everything back on track. Then next, just wanted to give you an update on where we are with our staff right now. So from the fiscal year 15-16, we added 3 firefighters. We added 3 more in 16-17, and we've added 3 more in the 17-18 budget back in October. So that, and we've got 3 more that will come online hopefully on April 1st. We're in the process now of that posting is open, and we're taking applications for those positions now to get all the testing and physical agility tests and all those types of items done by that time. We kind of changed our hiring process a little bit this round. We are looking at increasing our diversity level in the fire department. It's something that we feel strongly about. We feel that it brings a positive enhancement of our department to be able to increase our diversity level and move our workforce towards better reflecting the look of our community. Having the people from different backgrounds we know is going to bring new ideas into our department and only help us, serve our citizens better on a day-to-day basis. The hiring process now, HR has been a big help with helping us change that. They've been, we're doing more recruiting now. We're going out to recruiting events. HR has been helping us with that, and Public Affairs has been helping us print, a lot of different recruiting materials that we're taking out to job fairs and things like that with us. We've been going to the military bases as well, going to recruiting fairs that they have at the military bases locally here. So we're trying to make a big push here to get a lot more applicants in this time. And, at the current state, we've got about 250 people that have applied for those jobs so far. So we hope our efforts are helping with that. We also will have 3 lieutenants and 3 FAOs, which is the fire apparatus operators, that will be promoted once we get everything set up for Station 3. That promotional process is set and will be decided by mid-March. And we'll kind of know where everything sits for that at that point. Next is just showing you that Engine 3 has been completed. We had a successful trip to Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago to look at, you got to take a test drive. So, you got to take a test drive someplace. So it ended up at Lambeau Field, so pretty nice test drive. And, we're excited to get the engine back here and get it in service, serving the citizens. Next, I wanted to just show you and go into a little bit of description about some of our responses. So this is our response data for the past year or so in South Schertz. As the fire chief, this is one of the most important things that I look at on a day-to-day basis is response times. And so as you can see here, this is kind of a hot map of the calls that we've had in South Schertz. And then on the next one is just kind of showing you some of our response times that we're looking at right now. So you see Station 1 is up here at the top. And all the way out, these are actual calls that we've had in these areas, and these are our response times to those areas. So 18 to 19 minutes. And as we know, during rush hour traffic and stuff, some of those become a little bit longer. But I just kind of give you an example here of some of the different neighborhoods off of 1518 as well, some 12 to 13 minute response times, some 10 to 11 minute response times in Crossvine, and then this kind of represents the area around Corbett Junior High here, some 9 to 10 minute responses. So as I said, this is one of the most important things I look at as the fire chief, to get, service as fast as we can to the citizens. We look at this as, all these calls represent somebody that was sitting there with a loved one waiting on someone to arrive. And I would venture to say most of these probably felt like they were twice as long as that, waiting on that. So I just wanted to show you that. And then, so we just want to talk about options now that we look at. And so we have the engine now. It'll be here in the next week or so. We've got the staff pretty much trained up and hired. Most of those that we hired a couple of years ago when we started staffing up for this station have been trained and everything. They're online now and everything's going well with their training. We got to look at, we're still at least 12 months out on this station. It's going to take another few months to get the dirt turning, so we're still a few months out. So I've got an idea that I've been looking at to go out and find a temporary station so that we could start immediately addressing those response times. And so I've been looking out all in that 1518 area, I-10 access road. And so, we think we can cut the response times by over 50 to 60% in some of those areas by setting up a temporary station. And we located one on Trainer Hale Road where the CCMA plant is at. They've got a 4-bedroom house and a barn that we could house an engine in and a brush truck. And so we also looked at Chief Hanson's house, and he offered it. So this is the house, and then this is the barn location where that temporary site could be. So we've been working with our partners from CCMA, just seeing if this would be something that would work, and they've been very agreeable to work with us on that, and so we're just here trying to get some direction from council on moving forward with this project.
I'm sorry, Chief, real quick, the estimated cost, we have to do some paving work to get the truck up in there.
We estimate that this would be about $15,000 total to do some asphalt work and a little bit of work on the house.
And so, to be blunt, maybe to clarify, staff is planning to come forward with an agreement with CCMA on this in a couple of weeks. Unless we hear otherwise, that's what we're planning to do. So unless you tell us you don't like it, we're moving ahead with this.
All right, so a couple things. First of all, this is something we've been working on for years. It's coming to fruition. Nice work seeing it through, and very creative potentially working with CCMA to get an engine company down there and functional before we ever have a building. That's innovative stuff. That's excellent, and putting forward, above all other things, reducing response times. Absolutely spot on. So that said, I suspect council may have a question or two about some portions of the presentation, but first of all, great stuff. Excellent. Excellent work. Mr. Edwards.
Yes, Kate, I want to thank you for something. What you stood up and said just now about diversity, that's important. And I think you took a risk by getting up and saying that. But risk is also rewarding. So I want to commend you on that. And that's the type of leadership I like to see. Thank you so much. Number two, the response times. If you go back to the map and you show the 18-minute response times out there, you're right. I've actually had to go to a hospital in an ambulance once, and you're right. Response to 2 minutes seems like an hour, just 2 minutes. So we're talking 120 seconds. That seemed like an hour to me. With that being said, we are talking about station number 3 right now. Okay, so I want everyone to just look at the map and see all the open land there and what the development is going to call for in the future. So not only should we be thinking about station number 3, we may also want to start securing an area for station number 4. I think it's important for us to think much further out than just the completion of this station number 3. I do agree 100% that we should go forward with the CCMA building. I think that's smart use of our assets, and thank you guys for coming up with that particular alternative as well. So thank you.
Very good. Mr. Crawford?
Chief Long, can you and Mr. James get this house thing set up in the next week?
We hope to have an agreement with CCMA here at the next council meeting. Again, as Chief Long said, we still have to hire a few people. We have to get the truck down, but once we're ready to go, the idea is not to have those folks have to wait that facility is ready to move forward. And so work has to be done. But again, you talked about the hiring. So again, I hopefully in there in April, something like that. Again, as he said, to be very clear, that's a long wait for somebody sitting there with a loved one. And we're going to push to shorten that very quickly.
I'm just as strong as Mr. Edwards is about moving forward with this. And I like the concept of thinking about Station 4 because it's been 6 or so years since we started talking about Fire Station 3, and we're still a year and a half away. So sooner would be great.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Scagliola?
Yeah, thanks so much, Chief. This is wonderful. It's we've been waiting a long time for this station. I've been bouncing around a couple of different locations exactly where to put it. The sooner you can get up and running, the better as far as I'm concerned. One of the things you might want to consider also is Civilo's just on the other side of the creek there. They're looking at expanding big time also. Maybe Fire Station 4 could be a joint effort. Just just something to think about. Let's pool our interests. That's all I have, sir.
Okay. Anyone else? there's no action on this one, so Chief, thank you. Appreciate the work, and look forward to hearing from you here in a couple of weeks on the further progress.
Thank you.
All right, if council will indulge me one more time, I'm going to move to item number 8. We have another guest that's with us this evening. It arrived just a bit ago, and see if we can accommodate. So item number 8 is Resolution 18R14, and it reads, it's a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a parkland improvement agreement for Halley's Cove subdivision units 1, 2, 3, and 4, and other matters in connection therewith. Evening once again, sir.
Good evening.
Once again, I'm moving around, and hopefully you had a little bit of a heads up there that might happen. Sorry for jumping around all over the place, but I'm trying to accommodate our guest when we can.
So the item that you have before you is a request by the developer of Halley's Cove subdivision to enter into a parkland improvement agreement. This is going to be very, very similar to the one that we heard, I believe, very end of November, beginning of December for the Parkland subdivision up in North Schertz. This is just completely opposite end. So to give everybody a quick refresher, Halley's Cove is located right here, approximately almost 1,400 feet north of I-10, which you can see in the very bottom corner here. This is the single-family subdivision that's being developed down there right now. If you drive by, you've seen all the work, and I think most of the roads are getting close to being finished up, and they're finishing up the first 2 units. So this is a planned development district. It's master planned into 5 units. I've kind of broken them up just to give you an idea. This is 1518 here. So it's broken up into 5 units with 2 parks that are being proposed. This one to the south is approximately 12 acres, and this one to the north is approximately 24. And one thing that you'll notice, these dark dashed lines is a designation for floodplain. This is along the Woman-Hollering Creek floodplain there. And so this southern property is almost completely encumbered by that floodplain, whereas the northern one has a fair amount of developable parkland. So out of this planned development, it was planned this way to have this much open space, but it is approximately 36 acres of park that the city will end up getting, and which is part of our parks master plan for Southern Schertz, which includes a lot of linear parks to pick up a lot of this floodway along the floodplain in South Schertz. Additionally, the improvements being proposed in this will include this 10-foot sidewalk. That's kind of just roughly depicted here, may not be this exact item. Will work as we get closer into the actual planning of this park and permitting where the trail will be completely and how it will look. This park will feature a wider section of roadway to allow for on-street parking that we anticipate for folks who may not be residents that are coming to use the park. The overall subdivision is 147 lots, so it's not real big, but it will have very nice trailhead amenities as this linear park gets built, and this will be the first kind of puzzle pieces to that ongoing puzzle of building that linear park in South Schertz. And so this plan development was approved by the City Council September of 2016. The first couple units are getting close to being done. And what the Parkland Agreement does is allows the developer to place a surety with the city, a fiscal surety with the city, to bond these improvements so that we can record the plats, they can start building the homes, and then as we get to the units that have the park in them, they would then dedicate and do those improvements. So again, the southern park is not proposed at any improvements right now, and y'all may say, well, wow, these are huge parks, but not a lot of improvements. As the council may know, our parkland dedication is approximately $1,000 per lot, and that gets broken up to $350 in land dedication and $650 improvements. So $650 times 147 is not a whole lot of money to throw at this as a bigger park would be. So these are the improvements that are proposed. The agreement is written so that the improvements would be deferred until Unit 5, which contains the park, as I go back here. So this is the last unit. And so they would build it. They would continuously add surety as they come into plat Units 1 through 4. And then with 5, they would complete improvements, dedicate the park as we record the plat. So this agreement has been reviewed by our city attorney with no objections, and city staff supports this agreement going forward.
Thank you, sir. Council questions?
I do have one question.
Mr. Edwards.
So the developers here, I'm assuming. So will they actually put signage up saying future park here? Because I know typically in the model home, they would say future parkland. So I wonder if there's going to be any signage up saying.
So a little bit of it, and the funny thing on this, typically we don't allow that signage under our current sign code, just as an FYI. But part of this is the road that's going to be in front of the park up here isn't even going to be built until Unit 5. And so you can't really see that that park's going to be there other than them having obviously their promotional literature that the builders will have saying, hey, you got these two great city parks that are right next door to you.
Thank you. Very good. Mr. Crawford?
Ron, how much did you say the surety bond's going to be?
So it depends. It's broken up by each individual unit. And give me just a second and I can tell you what it'll run. So it equates, and I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time finding it. Oh, here we go. So the total value of the improvements is estimated at $95,520, and they'll be providing a surety to total $119,400, which is 125% of the cost of those improvements.
So we're pretty sure that'll cover everything then, right?
Yeah, so that will cover their obligation that they're required under our code to do improvements to.
Good. Thank you.
Dr. Scagliola?
You did a really, really good job on this. I like it. It looks like there's a lot of green space there, but my understanding is generally parkland dedication needs to be usable green space. And if this is in a floodplain, I mean, it looks like a lot of green space, but how was it actually calculated?
Sure. So when the planned development district was done, the request by the developer for this area was to use the estate and neighborhood planned development district template, which is a district written into the Unified Development Code as a PDD with some general requirements. The main goal on it is to do two options. So it's either half-acre lots, as we see in a lot of areas in South Schertz, or clustered development with dedicated open space. And so traditionally what the PDD would require is a 50% open space calculation. I believe this one's a little less, closer to about 40%, maybe 38%, because what we get out of this is much larger lots. So these are the 90 by, I believe they're the 90 by 120 or the 80 by 120, which is our R1 zoning district, which is the largest dimensioned lot that we have in our zoning category, because as we get to RA and then Ag District, it just goes into acreage.
So Councilman Scagliola, maybe, and again, I was involved in this one previously as it went to the Parks Board, so you may recall that our ordinance requires that prior to the city accepting any land for a park, that goes before our Parks and Recreation Board. Part of the point of that is so that we are not taking leftover unusable tracts of land, but we are getting good usable tracts of land. As Bryce noted, the northern tract is about 24 acres. My recollection is about 15 or 16 acres of that is high and dry. You can see the line for the floodplain through there, and it looks like it's maybe 2/3 to the left, which is high and dry. So again, we have a fairly large usable high and dry tract relative to our other city parks. And the reason we took the floodplain is, if you recall with the thoroughfare plan, we and our Parks Master Plan, we want to have trails along those creek corridors, much like in San Antonio, the Tobin Creek Trail, the Salado Creek Trail, things like that. So the reason we take the floodplain at the lower dedication is to get that trail corridor in. But yes, sir, we have a very usable tract of land. As we've been blunt before, we have learned our lessons of taking properties that are either unusable because of detention. You'll notice Bryce didn't point out, but the two detention ponds are not part of our park. So we're not having the developer's detention as part of our park. They are not overly encumbered by easements, as is the Cypress Point Park. And again, we have plenty of high and dry land.
I appreciate that. I haven't been dealing with these plats for a few years now, so it's nice to see we haven't taken a step backwards. We're actually going forward on this. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Crawford?
Price. I'm going to presume this has an HOA, and they'll take care of those detention ponds and things like that, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
All right, anyone else? Is there a motion to approve Resolution 18R14?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we approve Motion 18R14.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Crawford, second from Mr. Edwards. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're going to go back now to the workshop. Excuse me. And that is the update regarding crime statistics. Chief?
Everybody loves stats late in the evening. Try that again. Getting closer. Mayor and Council, Mr. James, good evening. I was asked to prepare a short presentation on crime statistics and trends. This is very similar to a presentation I did about this same time last year to provide a general overview of our statistics, comparison with some of the other agencies in our area, and discuss any emerging trends and what we're doing about those. Anytime that we're discussing comparisons of crime statistics, the most efficient means is to use the Uniform Crime Report, the UCR. This is a report that's published annually by the FBI and has been since 1930. All law enforcement agencies in the U.S. are required to submit annual reports. The FBI then compiles these reports and for the purpose of comparisons and the like. Annual reports are submitted by the end of February. The compiled UCR report is typically available during the mid-year in the summertime. Therefore, the 2017 numbers that you'll see tonight may be slightly incomplete at this time. They come from our internal records management system. When the agency statistics are compared, it's typically what's called the Part 1 crimes, which is the more serious crimes, and this is a list of those. So the numbers that are coming up now, the 2014, 2015, and 2016 numbers are the actual UCR numbers. Again, the 2017 numbers are from our records management system. They may be adjusted before they're actually printed in the summer. There's certainly no more serious crime than that of murder. Often these are the results of family violence, or at least between people that are known to each other. Fortunately, we have not had one in the last 2 years. There was an increase in assaults last year. Again, most of the assaults do occur between people known to each other, such as family violence. And unfortunately, this is a trend that is being seen nationwide. You will observe an increase in robberies, and I will point out that robberies, by definition, it can be a theft that involves a physical contact, such as someone that is shoplifting that may pull away from the store clerk. That would be considered a robbery. So even though these numbers have increased, several of those are as I described. Burglary and theft statistics are slightly misrepresented, and this has to do with a change in reporting that we did in 2016. Now, prior to 2016, if there were multiple occurrences that occurred near each other, for example, if there was, say, 4 burglaries of a motor vehicle that occurred on the same street, they would often be considered one report, and they would only count as one. That's incorrect. We made that correction in 2016, and now that would be 4 instead of 1 reports. So that does, we believe that that does show some inflation of the numbers. Even with that said, you'll notice there's an actual decrease in theft during 2017. Now, like some of the citizens that have spoken with you, frankly, we believed, using the anecdotal information, that there was an increase in thefts, and that is not supported by the empirical data. Auto thefts are on the rise. I can tell you that often these vehicles are recovered within a day or so, and it's typically because someone did not return a borrowed vehicle when they were supposed to, and occasionally it's a repossession. In fact, 35 of these were instances other than an actual stolen vehicle. Now, the UCR will list crimes in various formats for comparison purposes, such as crimes per population. And although I didn't list every agency in our area, I did get most of them here. Now, this is a list of crimes per 1,000 in order by the 2016 numbers. On this particular list, we want to be as low as we can on the list. 11 of the 19 agencies listed experienced an increase as we did. And if you'll notice, the 2017 unofficial number shows a slight reduction in those crimes. UCR also tracks clearance rates. This is a list where we want to be near the top. Using the same sample cities, you'll see that our rate is good. It's not as excellent as we were last year, but it's still good. And again, our 2017 number shows the same clearance rate. There's still a few weeks in the reporting period, so that number is likely to improve slightly. Focusing on trends, we compare the last 4 months of 2017 and how they compare to the previous 3 years. Excuse me. So there were a few increases, but by the totals shown, either a reduction or the same compared to last year. In addition, we were below in most of the individual categories. A couple even experienced a 4-year low. So again, the empirical data doesn't support the belief of a sharp increase in crime. So in summary, the data supports that Schertz is still a safe community. This is demonstrated not only by the UCR data presented, but the high approval rating and belief from the Schertz of a safe community from the citizen survey, and we are repeatedly recognized as one of the Texas 50 safest cities by the annual SafeWise report. And with that said, we're certainly not satisfied with these numbers. A good clearance rate and low crimes per 1,000 mean absolutely nothing to the victim of a crime. And frankly, any increase is unacceptable. That may not be a realistic approach, but certainly it's something that we strive for. Our citizens have a higher expectation than perhaps people that live in San Antonio, other large cities, or a city that may be better known for crime. That's the reason some people move here. And we recognize that and certainly accept that. I can tell you that the men and women of your police department take great pride in the work that they do, and they take this personally. There's often conversations in the roll call, in the hallways, about things that may be occurring, trends that may be seen, with the idea of trying to prevent those. We're always looking for ways to improve, and we hope that the favorable ratings will continue, but it won't ever be good enough. We'll constantly be looking for something better. So what are we doing? In every opportunity that I have, and certainly our crime prevention officer has, we discuss the need for a partnership with our community. We cannot solely rely on the efforts of either the police department or the city in crime prevention. In fact, the citizen has some responsibility as well. And that responsibility may be nothing more than locking a door or closing a garage door, turning lights on at dusk, not leaving packages on the doorstep. To bring this message home, we started posting weekly statistics on our social media and the websites. And hopefully, if this video will work, it will explain what we're doing.
The goal is transparency and communication. Schertz police rolling out a detailed new way to report crime to the community. The Night Team's Courtney Friedman got to see a brand new crime log before it went live on the city's website today. It's tonight's Crime Fighters Report.
It's officially up and running.
A burglary of a habitation, entry was made through a window, and we had a couple of burglary of buildings.
A brand new weekly crime log Schertz police rolled out today, but will soon be posting every Tuesday afternoon. The first week's results already surprising some community members.
In this subdivision in Schertz Belmont Park, there were 7 car burglaries just in the last week, and in every single one, the car was not locked.
Totally shocked and taken unaware.
Deborah Wright couldn't believe there was so much going on in her small neighborhood that she didn't know about.
Our neighborhood is safe, but no neighborhood is safe enough to leave your car unlocked.
That's the exact response Officer Helen Lafitte was hoping for. When she sees weekly crime trends, she plans to include related safety tips.
We'd like to remind everyone to never leave your valuables in your car and always lock the doors.
The posts will go up on the City of Schertz website.
So you would go to the services, to police, and then we've got it under our services tab, public information, and crime stats.
And that link will be shared on their Facebook and Twitter pages.
What type of mode of operation there was, if it was forced entry, if it was, an unlocked window like we have.
Is this something you would check?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd check it, yeah.
Wright and Lafitte hoping the system will lower crime. Courtney Friedman, KSAT 12 News.
And Schertz police hope this will encourage neighbors to start talking more with each other and together report crime when it happens. As time goes on, they'll start comparing crime from month to month and eventually year to year.
We're certainly grateful to KSAT 12 for showing that last night. That was almost a 2-minute report. That's very rare that you can get 2 minutes of news time. Something that stood out from the data that we posted yesterday was that there was 10 burglary of motor vehicles that occurred last week. That is a completely unacceptable number. That's far too high. Out of those 10, 100% were vehicles that were left unlocked. That's the message that we're trying to get across with this. Lock your vehicles, take some precautionary actions. Something else that we're doing is what we're doing with our staff. We are one hire away from getting into the new positions that you approved in budget the last 2 years. That will provide more officers than this city has ever seen. We're getting very close to that. We'll be able to assign, even now we're able to assign more officers to the mid shift. That's the one that will overlap the day shift and the night shift. This is putting the most officers on when they're most needed. The increased staffing is also going to allow for officers to patrol in unmarked vehicles. They won't be call responsive, obviously, but they will be out there to look for burglaries, look for thefts, and occasionally some narcotics investigations as well. I will certainly try to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Mr. Larson?
Thank you, Chief. This was very quick turnaround time on the stats, so I really appreciate it. And I think I just want to say great job from you and the police department. We're very thankful to have such an engaged, active, and aggressive, in a good way, police department. So you probably don't like this, probably the wrong term to use, certainly, but I thank you for the quick response. That news bit with KSAT was great, and I had a chance to check the crime stats and the page and to see how y'all are going to be updating that, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. And even though I had heard the lock your doors, when I was able to look at the stats and see that nearly every crime that was reported was an unlocked window or unlocked door, it's certainly a reminder for me and my family. So thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you. And to be honest with you, we had already started working on the stats before you asked, so it was great timing, and we appreciate that.
Very good. Anyone else? Chief Kaiser?
What kind of trend, upward or downward, are you seeing with drug-related crimes?
So there is not a significant change that I'm aware of, and we can certainly go back and look at the numbers. A lot of our drug-related crime is transient. There's not a lot that occurs here. There is some, but it's not great numbers at all. It's the people that are coming through, as I said, transient.
And one more thing. Are there certain areas that you're finding, higher crime rates than others? And if so, are you, on your reassignments, are you putting more people in those officers in those areas, or what's being done there?
Well, we're always looking for patterns, and the patterns are not always there. Fortunately, we don't have enough crime that it makes it easy to do the patterns. But 10 in 1 week gives us cause. And yes, we are putting additional people in there. Some will not be in marked vehicles. Some will not be in uniform. And the sole purpose is to be in those areas and watch for that and maybe get lucky.
Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, Chief, thank you so much. I cannot wait to report back when I go visit a couple of the high schools and talk to the people that said that there were some surprising crimes happening in their neighborhood. So thank you so much, and I cannot wait to share more information about the website as well. So I want to thank you for what you've done. Thank you again.
Mr. Crawford?
Chief, on the statistics, are all crimes reported irrespective of the age of the individual?
That's correct. It's simply the crime. It has nothing to do with the suspect.
Good. Thank you.
Anyone else? Chief, thanks for the update. Appreciate it, and appreciate the department's excellent work. All right, the next item that we have on the agenda this evening is our consent agenda. Item number 3 we're going to look at separately. So anyone have a desire to have items 1 or 2 pulled for individual consideration?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to remove item number 2 from consent just for discussion, a light discussion.
Okay. Anything else? In that case, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of February 6, 2018?
Second.
A motion from Mr. Crawford, a second from Mr. Larson. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Next item we have is item number 2, Ordinance 18M06, an ordinance by the City Council of Schertz. An ordinance by the City of Schertz, Texas, amending City Council Code of Ethics, amending Section 2, confidentiality of information shared in executive session, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflicts with this ordinance, and providing an effective date. I would argue it would be closed session, but there it is. Mr. Edwards.
Mr. Mayor, I just have a couple of things here I wanted to ask. So I want to make sure our firm is instructing our sister city, Cibolo, the other night had a meeting on ethics and about their response to closed session, and they were told not to release anything from closed session ever. When that was brought up by one of the council members, they were told they were to talk about it offline. Is that still the case from our city attorney?
I'm not familiar with what you're referring to. I mean, I don't attend the Cibolo council meeting.
This was Habib's his meeting. So so I'm hearing 2 different things. I'm hearing our sister city is saying do not discuss anything, and we're saying that we can discuss certain things. So I'm just wondering from the same firm. That's all I'm asking.
Right. Well, it's not based on the firm though. It's based on what each city adopts as their code. What they adopt as their code of ethics or rules and how they want to operate.
Okay. Second thing, Mr. Santiago, I gave you documents that were requested on an open records request from that closed session that we had. Have you guys come to a determination about those particular items yet?
Yes, those items are being processed and sent to the Attorney General as part of a request for an opinion, or they'll either they will be sent off for a request for opinion, or they will be released if there's no exception to claim. So.
Okay, that's all I needed to ask Mr. Mayor about item number 2.
Very good. Anyone else? Not, is there a motion to approve the final reading on 18M06?
So moved.
Second.
A motion from Mr. Larson, second from Mr. Crawford. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Item number 3, I have a note on here that staff asked that we pull this from consent, and it is Ordinance 18T05, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an adjustment to the fiscal year 2018 budget, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. So we are on final reading here. However, Mr. Walters.
Yes. As you may have seen in the revised council ordinance and the updated memo stating the reason for the change, we did open bids and were somewhat surprised that they came back a little bit higher than we thought. So the budget adjustment had to change for the CCMA temporary sewer treatment plant only. So that's the only change, given the fact that it's already been posted with the numbers we saw last week. If council will accept the change, that they make a motion stating that the dollar amounts will have changed. So we have that on record and everyone's on the same page, that we're not trying to slip in more money or change the purpose of that adjustment.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Walters?
So Mr. Walters, the $109,000, so the remaining payment of $109,829, and it will not have an impact on the activity project list? I mean, is that?
The $109,000, I believe, was the park restroom. So that was a previously approved amount from last fiscal year. We're just reauthorizing the same amount that we all agreed on beforehand.
Okay, thank you.
So once again, what should a motion be styled as to do? I mean, we're supposed to, we to call out a specific dollar amount?
Yes, that would be helpful. Do you have the dollar amounts in front of you?
The dollar amount's being changed to $359,700 for the CCMA project.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 18T05 with a change budget amount of $359,700.
Second.
I have a motion for Mr. Edwards, a second for Mr. Gutierrez. Any other questions or comments from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 I have 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. All right. I think we're back in our normal order of business. Next item we have on the agenda this evening are minutes consideration or action regarding the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of January 23rd, 2018. I've had a chance to look at both versions. I don't have any issues at all with the version that Mr. Crawford had asked things be changed to. I don't have any objection. So, council, you just have to decide which version of the minutes you'd like to approve. So, Mr. Crawford.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes that with the second version, the one that I had corrected or had added to that where we spoke.
Second.
I have a motion for Mr. Crawford, a second for Dr. Kaiser. Any other comments or questions from council? Mr. Larson?
I think it's completely reasonable to have amendments to the minutes to reflect the accurate reading of what occurred. I don't know if this is related to minutes, but I would think that the normal procedure for amending the minutes would simply be to pull it from consent when posted, and then have this discussion for changing. So I guess my only objection is to have the minutes, not in the changing of the minutes, but the way the minutes were changed, and so I just wanted that to be on the record. I think it's very reasonable to make sure that the minutes are accurate, but I'd like to see a standard process for that occurring.
All right, anyone else? Mr. Gutierrez?
I agree with Mr. Larson here. Minutes are informal notes used to describe a particular subject that we're discussing. Making changes to them creates a mixture of both formal and informal notes. So I would, in future, I would like for it to come up as an agenda item so that we can discuss it instead of just making the changes when requested to our city secretary. Again, I must reiterate that the minutes are just a summary of the topics that we discuss and not transcripts.
Okay, very good. Anyone else? Mr. Crawford?
Mr. Santee, are the minutes completely informal, or are they a legal document that should represent salient points?
Well, the minutes are They don't have to be a formal document. They don't have to be a formal word for word. They're not intended to be a transcript. They're intended to list the items and the actions taken and a summary of the discussion that was had. It's up to this body how much detail they want to include in those before they approve them.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I offered an apology to the city secretary and to the council, and I will in the future pull the minutes from the consent agenda if they need to be restated to match the words that were said on something that is considered important. Any one of us can do that. And I have no problem with that concept at all. Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else? I do have a motion and a second to approve the minutes, the second set as were changed by the city secretary per Mr. Crawford's request. Call for vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
We have 6 ayes and 1 nay. Motion carries. Mr. James has pointed out that we've been at it now for a couple of hours and that there's a request for a quick break. So if there's no objection from council, we're going to have a 5-minute recess. 45 seconds. Go back into our open session. It's roughly 8:18. All right, so the next item we have on the agenda is item number 5, Resolution 18R09, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing expenditures with Lockwood Andrews and Noonem, Inc., totaling no more than $140,410 for professional engineering design services for the 2018 drainage maintenance projects and other matters in connection therewith. It's not as long as a bond caption, but it's close. All right. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. James. I'm here to ask Council to consider authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Lockwood Andrews and Noonem for the engineering and design of 2 underground drainage projects and 5 concrete riprap projects. Y'all have a map attached where they are all located. The projects were approved in the 2017-2018 budget. The cost of engineering and design will be $127,645.50 with a contingency of $12,764.50, which adds up to a not to exceed amount of $140,410.
And you said, I'm sorry, go ahead. And you said that this has already been budgeted in this year's budget, and this is restricted funds that we're using for this, or is this just regular funds? Okay, very good. Questions, council? Mr. Crawford?
I better. When I looked at this, I was hoping this was going to be the North Cliff drain thing that we had a while back, but I didn't see that on there.
There is one up in North Cliff,
yeah.
Castle Hills.
It's the same company, right? Or was it? Okay. So you can forget my question then. Or I'll talk to Mr. James later.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? Mr. Edwards?
Mr. Mayor, since we have this at our disposal and we also have this in our packet, I'd like to attempt to craft a motion that would read like this. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 18R09 as well as resolution number 18R12.
In order to,
you have to read the caption.
I definitely need to read the caption, and as long as we really should take up each one individually, just given our charter language.
I'll withdraw my motion and make the motion to approve resolution number 18R09.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Larson. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays. Next item is item number 6, resolution 18R12. Mr. Edwards?
Is there somebody else that wants to make the motion?
I'll make the motion to approve resolution number 18R12.
Second.
A motion from Mr. Larson, a second from Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments, questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 With 7 ayes and no nays, the motion carries. Next item is item, thank you, sir. Item number 7, resolution 18R13, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing expenditures totaling no more than $95,000 with Hydro Pro Solutions for water meters during the 2017-2018 fiscal year and other matters in connection therewith. Evening, sir. I don't know if somebody wants to make a motion to approve this one before we have a presentation for staff. We can, I mean,
You know what?
straightforward
Give me,
restricted funds.
Now, I'm here tonight to seek.
Hold on, Dr. Scagliola.
No, I was just saying, you briefed us on the need for these meters a number of times. Maintenance costs are going up, and you just can't help it. So in lieu of that, how about if I just make a motion to approve resolution number 18R13?
Second.
I have a motion from Dr. Scagliola. I have a second from Mr. Davis. Any other comments or questions from council?
Now, unless you really want to have your speaking part, okay?
I'm going to say it's a fantastic presentation, and council's. I'm betting on a 7-0 vote. I'll call for vote.
Vote aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
I have 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Yes, Mr. James.
Sorry, I'll try to be very brief, but just for folks in the audience and council, the motion was to approve the purchase or funding to buy new water meters. We plan on having a discussion at the upcoming council retreat to get some direction with regard to a significant overhaul and replacement of our current meters. Part of that is consideration of going to smart meters that provide more information for our residents. So just wanted to mention that on this item.
All right, very good. The next item that we have on the agenda this evening is item number 9, Resolution 18R15, a resolution by the City Council, City of Schertz, Texas, adopting the 2018 City of Schertz Strategic Plan and other matters in connection therewith.
Yes,
Evening.
thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Give me just 1 second while I get this pulled up, please. Okay, so this item is for formally adopting the 2018 City of Schertz Strategic Plan document. As Council recalls, on January 19th, we held our annual strategic plan retreat where we reviewed the current strategic plan, and there were following proposed revisions that Council made throughout it. So it's just proposing and adopting those changes. So I'm going to go through those. Of course, the first one would be an update to the cover, and then also to the council and staff page to have that be reflective of those that were there at that time. Then on Chapter 2, which was the policy values, there were a couple of changes here. On page 7 for the high quality of life under the is column, it was after lots of discussion to change it from a friendly city to a welcoming city. On page 8, the first change under economic prosperity is column would be to combine the 3rd and 5th bullet points. And so the proposed change to read a diverse, stable, and resilient commercial base from just a diverse and resilient commercial base, and then removing the 5th bullet point. Again, on page 8, under fiscally sustainable, the is column, the first bullet point, proposed change to expertise from knowledge. And then on page 8 as well, under fiscally sustainable, the is not column, to add a lack of financial and fiscal transparency. And those were the changes that staff captured during their retreat. And so again, we are seeking approval for this adoption of the strategic plan.
All right, questions? Anyone? Sounds a correct summary of our work.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 18R15.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Crawford. Any other comments or questions, council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is item number 10, Ordinance 18M09, an ordinance by the City of Schertz authorizing and amending the City Council Rules of Conduct and Procedure, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. I think these were the two that we had discussed last week. This is first reading, and any questions on this one? If not, is there a motion to approve 18M09 on first reading?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Davis, a second from Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Next item is item number 11, Resolution 18R16, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing additional expenditures totaling no more than $121,996.10 with Shook Mobile Technologies of Schertz from the Police Department's federal forfeiture funds for the purchase of an emergency response vehicle and associated equipment. Easy for me to say. Chief, how are you this evening?
Evening.
We had a couple minor upgrades. We had a scene light on top. We made a improvement to. Had some safety upgrades on steps, grab handles, and some emergency lighting, which brought the cost up a little bit more than we anticipated.
Sounds straightforward to me.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve resolution number 18R16.
Second. A motion from Mr. Larson, second from Mr. Edwards. Any other comments or questions from council? And then I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays. Motion carries. Thank you, Chief. Next item we have on the agenda is item number 12, Resolution 18R17, a resolution by the City Council of City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a professional services agreement with Jackson A&E and Associates and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. Waite.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Back in November 2011, the City Council approved a contract with Jackson A&E to act as the owner's representative for the City of Schertz for a number of building projects. A list of those in the memorandum talks about the Schertz Soccer Complex, the Aquatic Center, the Animal Adoption Center, the Dog Park, the recent Senior Center renovations, repair of the outside leaks at Fire Station number 2, and repair of the window wall at the Recreation Center, among some other, and then in addition to that, some other smaller projects as they've come up during the time that Jackson A&E has been acting. Council has continued to renew that contract with Jackson A&E, and they're currently working on 2 projects with staff at the City of Schertz. They're working on Fire Station number 3, and they're also working on the remodel renovations to the restrooms / locker rooms at the YMCA. Staff would like to ask council to entertain extending the contract with Jackson A&E for one more period. We would like to extend that contract for Jackson A&E and Mr. Godrow, who's sitting back there in the back row, to be able to continue to work with us on Fire Station number 3, as well as the YMCA Recreation Center project, and get both of those to completion. Also during that time, staff intends to reach out and develop an RFQ process and look at acquiring owner's representative services from another firm as well. And this would operate in our mind more like the on-call engineers that we do at Public Works. So we'd have an on-call owner's rep. So when we had a small project come up or a big project come up, then we could assemble that or contact that group, have them provide that owner's representative services for us. But it wouldn't be a constant retainer that they are on. We'd do it on an as-needed basis. But to get us through our Fire Station number 3, where Mr. Godrow's been extremely beneficial to the process, especially with some of the issues that we've been having, and the YMCA, we'd like to continue that and not interrupt that with another firm in the middle of the project, and have him continue that for us, and then look at bringing on this on-call firm and allow them even to spend some time with Mr. Godrow as well as city staff on some of these projects, just trying to see how the city operates and that type of thing.
Okay, thank you, sir. Council questions? Mr. Crawford?
The proposed rate on this is $10,000 a month, not to exceed $120,000 in the year.
That is correct.
That's for 2 projects.
Been doing since 2011, yes.
And we're also talking about switching to another mechanism, an on-call company. So we're implying we're going to spend more money, or we're going to spend less money on the 120 per year that we've been spending for the last 6 years, plus travel costs. The question I'm trying to ask is, how come we can't find somebody here that can do the same thing and not spend all the travel costs? And how much are we going to spend on these 2 projects versus what we're going to have to spend on additional project that we know we're going to have for the next year starting 1 March? So I'm questioning the decision process and when we're going to make things be more local and try to cut our costs to have some savings possibly.
That is part of the RFQ process that we're looking to endeavor upon, is to seek a firm. Ideally locally. We have some local firms that have reached out to the city on various occasions. And so ideally it would be locally, but it's to find a firm that can come in. Right now we don't have any looking out, we know we're going to be building more, we're going to be doing more work, but we don't have anything on the books saying this is what we're going to do. So that was one of the reasons we wanted to look at doing this at an on-call basis. Additionally, the funding for our owner's representative has always come out of the funds that are available for the project. And so that is covered by that. So it's not an addition. It would be additional money, right? So if we do this RFQ, council approves, and we bring on a firm, and then 3 months later we get a project, either something breaks bad or a tornado hits something or whatever, and we use this on-call firm as our owner's rep for that project, then the fees that owner's rep is going to take would come out of the project fees. And ideally, if they're doing their job correctly, the money we would save as a result of the work that they're providing for us as experts in architecture, engineering, and construction, the savings they will provide for us will more than compensate for the fees that they charge us to do that work.
And maybe if I may add, Councilman Crawford, go ahead, I apologize.
I understand what you said. So the question becomes, are we paying $120,000 each of the last 5-6 years for the service? Have we had basically a full-time Mr. Goudreau working to do these things? That's kind of the question. For $120,000 a year plus travel costs from Dallas 2 times a month at least, sometimes more, and possibly not. Could we have somebody that we could use to do that full time and maybe do other things to help us on other contracts or other issues that could pop up in the city? It's a question of philosophy maybe.
Yeah.
But it's also a question of spending dollars as wisely as we can.
One of the things
I need to come back to you in a second, but go ahead, Mr.
One of the things that I probably wasn't real clear upon is that Jackson A&E's contract with the city has always been usually spelled out for specific projects and other small projects as they become available. And so we've gotten their services for a number of smaller things that were not in the $120,000 estimate to have their services for a full year to build, say, the Aquatic Center. While Mr. Godrow was doing the Aquatic Center, he did a number of other small projects around the city to help staff out because of his expertise. Ideally, yes, $120,000 plus expenses, and then any other projects that may have come along. So during this time, some of these projects have overlapped, and there's been additional costs in those additional projects, but those have always been contracts that have come before council, and council has approved.
I understand that too. Do you know if we spent $120,000 plus travel cost every year the last 5 years or not?
I believe there's been some years that have been more than that due to the projects overlapping or additional large projects coming on that weren't included in the additional contract, which required more time and effort of Jackson A&E.
Okay, thank you. Mr. James, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Apologize. Just maybe with regard to clarify and tack on to what Dudley had said. You know, I'm a firm believer that particularly with professional services contracts, it makes sense to periodically go out and look at what else is out there. And we typically do that through a request for qualifications process as opposed to a request for proposal process. So as you know, as a reference to the on-call engineering firms, we basically put out an RFQ for engineering firms to provide services. That gave us the ability to evaluate all of the different firms that were out there. We did that on the heels of having used the same few firms for about 5-6 years before that. And I think as Ms. Woodley has mentioned, we have the extensions. When those are up, we're going to go back out for an RFQ and reevaluate on-call engineering firms. To be clear, what we may find is we may retain some of those firms. Again, Ford Engineering has worked for the city for quite a while. LAN, Cobb, Finley, Pape, Dawson, fairly new to the city, and we would expect some of that to happen again going forward. So with regard to what we plan to do, as Dudley mentioned, in particularly given the fire station project and the timeliness of the rec center, we do not want to slow those projects down, and so we want to continue with the firm that's been with us that understands those projects to move them forward quickly. That being said, because it's been about 5 or 6 years, we want to go out and see what else is out there. What we may end up doing, based on the firms that submit and that we interview and that we like and that we score, we may recommend one firm, we may recommend more than one firm, much like we do engineering, and we'll do that based on the amount of work we anticipate to have. So again, the idea is to really go look and see what is out there. I will say this, that I can appreciate the concern for cost, because certainly if I'm spending more money on one thing, I don't have it for something else. We are somewhat limited under state law with regard to professional services contracts, our ability to negotiate or to make a selection based solely on price, and you may recall that with the on-call engineering firms going forward. But certainly I think the first thing that we gain from an RFQ is we basically find out how many folks out there are doing owner's rep services for cities with the kind of projects we have. Doesn't mean we can't get somebody who does private, but there's some differences there. And I think that'll be the first thing that'll be interesting. We put this thing out, how many folks in fact do this sort of work for the range of facilities that we have, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, I understand that. So my question partly becomes, are we ever going to have this capability on the city staff, because we need it, evidently we need it a lot based on the last 5 years?
We do.
We won't grow the next 20 years.
We will never have, so let me say this. It is my firm belief, and certainly as I jump in to say that, this may be the comment that makes me the shortest tenured acting city manager in the history of this city. But it is my belief that no, we will never have this as an on-staff service. It frankly really is too specialized a service that you have, that you have to be, City of San Antonio, for example, had a city architect. They still would go out for this type of service on occasion for projects. It's just too specialized. You really can't hire the right person. You can't retain the right person. And then I'll be really blunt. You don't want to hire this person, have them on staff, not be pleased with the work they do, and maybe with, like everybody else other than acting city manager, you can say, no, we're done with you. You then don't have the ability to not use that person going forward. So one of the benefits, for example, with Mr. Gaudreau's contract is, I believe it's got a 30-day provision that if we don't like what's going on, 30 days notice, we're out. That is really the benefit of this, is if you don't like the way you're going, you're out. You're not beholden to the person. And then frankly, I've got to tell you, we cannot afford, would never be able to hire a quality person who knows what they're doing. These people, frankly, work in the private sector. They work for a variety of cities. It's just out of the scope of a small city. The range of projects is too different. So even with our on-call engineering firms, we pick those firms to do particular projects because of their expertise. So there are some on-call firms that we will not use for a particular engineering project because it is not their strong point. So for example, all of our on-call firms are very good. We went out for an RFQ to do the thoroughfare plan update and the roadway impact fee. Not saying they're not qualified. It's a very specialized thing, and I wanted to have that look to see who has done them and where they've done them as opposed to even going on call. So in my opinion, we'll never have this on staff. In most cities our size, I don't think I know of one that does.
And Mr. James, I would add to that learning from our past, we didn't attempt to have an owner's rep on staff. We attempted just to have a general contractor on staff. And we were paying money today at Fire Station 2 in the Recreation Center because we didn't know what we were doing, and it's better left to the professionals. And so I would echo Mr. James's that it would never be my recommendation we would bring one of these on staff because of the high level of expertise that is needed to be able to function effectively as our representative in a room full of architects and engineers and general contractors.
Thank you. Although we have one on staff now, if Mr. Gudo's here as much as he has been the last 6 years.
But he is still
he is a contractor, yes, sir.
Of the city.
Yes, sir, I understand. I read the contract we signed back in 2016, and the rate stayed the same as stated in the document, but the maximum amount went down from 180 to 120. Still has the same expense lines and those things.
Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Gaudreau, thank you so much. I don't agree. I don't agree that we should bring someone on staff. I think when you pay their salary, their legacy costs, their retirement plans and everything else, and you're going to have them there for long term, you'd have to have a constant ongoing construction and also building going on for forever and a day on that. I don't think that's wisdom. It wouldn't be prudent financial management. I will say this, though. you know, some of the buildings that have gone through transition, like the rec center, some of the issues that we have with the fire stations, those were not Phil's issues. None of those were. However, I do have to say, as you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, but the scope of work for Mr. Gaudreau is to actually help us prior to, with the design stage as well as construction. He called it dumpster diving, and actually save us some money, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will say we have to own the animal shelter. That was one that we missed on with the was it the AC unit? Or
AC
something?
units and some other ventilation things.
That was the one we had to own. So if we're meant to be cost efficient, I do agree that we should extend the contract simply because we are in the process of doing the rec center bathrooms and also looking at the fire station as well. So I do agree that we need to extend the contract, but I highly suggest that we get a list of different firms or individuals that can actually do this, to be on that all-star team that we can pull up at a moment's notice and say, hey, look, Phil is busy doing these other things. And maybe at that time we give that 30-day notice and say, hey, you know, Phil, these guys over here, they have it. It's just something that we have to be, if we're going to be prudent financial managers with the taxpayers' resources, I think that's wisdom to do. So have a team of people.
And on the Animal Control Center, you're right, we do own that, but we may not own the problem.
Yeah.
And in a couple of weeks, hopefully a couple of weeks, we'll be able to come to you with an update on that, with some progress that we hope is being made there. So.
And by no means is that a slight toward.
No, absolutely.
I just want to say we have to make sure that we have that team in place, that if Phil is driving down 35 and something happens to him, we need to be able to have someone there.
And it's a lot of the work that he did that has kept the team, the design team and the construction team at the table and willing to pay the cost to get the building correct. And so absolutely I agree with that. But it's, you know, so they're still at the table. We're still working that one. But
So, Mr. Mayor, with that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 18R17.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Dr. Kaiser. Other comments, questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Thank you, sir. All right, we took care of our public hearings, item number 13, 14, and 15. So then we'll go to item 16, resolution 18R18, city policies. Mr. Waite.
Yes, sir. We came to City Council back in November to get feedback from City Council as a part of our policy development process. You may remember seeing this then, where we instituted a City Council review place in our process. These 6 policies we're going to talk about tonight, we all brought forward then. We've gone through the final drafting and the vetting phase, both through employees and our city attorney, and we're back tonight for approval and for FYI on a couple of them. So we have 4 policies that are HR policies Ms. Kurz will be presenting. Those are for council approval. We have a credit card policy that Mr. Walters will be discussing with council as an FYI. One, we want you to know what's going on and how we've changed that policy, but also for those of you that have city credit cards, it does apply to you. And then the last one will be the city's social media policy regarding the city's social media accounts, and Ms. Klepper will be coming to talk about that one. So Ms. Kurz is up first, I believe.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. As Mr. Waite mentioned, here we go. There are 4 HR policies that we brought before you before the holidays for some guidance and direction. The first one being the fraternization. And so I'm just going to kind of quickly provide an overview of what the purpose of the policies are, just to remind you. I know you have the draft copies in your packet. The fraternization policy is really looking to prohibit supervisor-subordinate relationships. As we discussed, we want to minimize the risk that comes along with those types of relationships. And so some of the key points of the policy, clearly it's going to prohibit sexual or romantic relationships between a supervisor and subordinate. The policy is limited in scope, so it's not going to address any other type of relationship in the workplace except for that direct or indirect supervisor-subordinate relationship. And then the second point to this policy is that when or if these types of relationships do occur, If disclosure is made up front, if a manager comes forward to disclose that a relationship is beginning, then the city would like to work with that individual to see if it would be possible, if there is a budgeted and vacant position for which that individual is qualified, then we would like to, seek maybe a transfer for that person. If it works out, great, and that's what we would hope for. And if not, then at some point we would have to make a determination about the continued employment of the manager involved in that relationship. And then, so second part of that is if disclosure is not made, and so maybe after the fact is revealed, then there would certainly be disciplinary action for the manager or supervisor involved in that type of relationship, up to and including termination. Would you like me to go through each of the policies and then ask about questions?
Why don't you go through the whole presentation, and then we'll come back if there's questions on any particular ones. Thanks.
Yes, sir. The next policies, actually two policies, you will recall that our current harassment policy is contained within one section of the employee handbook. We were advised a best practice would be to separate the two and have a sexual harassment policy and a harassment policy. So that's what we did here. You can see clearly we're going to be prohibiting employee conduct that would be considered or could be construed as harassment and or sexual harassment. In the sexual harassment policy, also, we did include specific examples of behavior or conduct that meet the legal definition of sexual harassment. Also, in both of these separate policies, there's a requirement for employees and supervisors to report any type of harassment that occurs. And so the fourth policy is actually a separate policy, and it is solely to outline the expectations of employees and supervisors in reporting these types of harassment. Some of the key points here, obviously the city is committed to taking action against any type of harassment or sexual harassment, and obviously and required by law, frankly, to do so. And one key point here, though, is that the city really has a commitment to do this, even if the employee or employees involved don't wish to move it forward. Once it comes to our attention, the city does have an obligation to look into these things, and certainly we want to do the right thing. There's also a requirement for employees and or supervisors to report it to up through 2 reporting lines or positions, if you will. So this is really a precautionary measure that we'd like to put in place to ensure that these types of allegations make their way to the appropriate party so that the appropriate action could be taken. So for instance, you would have a supervisor reporting to both their department head and HR, or potentially reporting to an executive director, and HR. Again, just to ensure that we're taking the action that needs to be taken. Again, every supervisor responsible for promptly reporting any complaint or suspected acts, again, regardless of what an employee may feel about that. HR will investigate all allegations. We have set forth a plan for going about these investigations, which include, of course, representation from our legal team. And that's really all I have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Coming through, we'll talk about the new credit card policy. So we had an existing credit card policy. Employees would come in and sign this policy after going through it with a member of finance or purchasing, and then sign at the bottom. So the purpose of the credit card policy is to outline proper use and reconciliation of city credit cards and their statements. So the key points of the updates that we made to our policy, including clarifying procedures for using the credit card, outlining more clearly the responsibilities of the department head, the cardholder themselves, and the finance department, who will track purchases and reconcile bills, and then try to make administrative improvements while maintaining the same level or higher level of oversight.
Good evening. So the social media policy, which is also in your packets as well, the intent behind this is to outline processes and procedures for use of any and all social media accounts on behalf of City of Schertz. So this would be for authorized users that are employees with us. and account administrators. We want to create a centralized approach for social media to also help manage the city's message. We want to make sure we're promoting a positive image for the city, being transparent, promoting citizen engagement. Social media can be a great platform for two-way conversation versus a website, which sometimes can be one-way. And then some key points. This is an operational policy, so this is something that really focuses on those authorized users and the account administrators. There's a small section in here which references employees' personal use, and then this does not govern specifically social media accounts by elected or appointed officials, so that's not the intent. The intent of this is to govern or operate employees who are authorized to post on behalf of the city.
All right, very good. So, all right, Council, we have 6 different items that are before us, and we want to address any questions that Council has on any of those. So, Dr. Kaiser?
If you could go back to the one on prohibition on harassment.
You want me to bring the...
Oh, yeah, if you could, please, this slide.
Do I need...
Is there some reason on the key points, number 1, you included, it seems, almost everything except sexual orientation? So race, age, gender, religion, color, disability, national origin. Is there some reason you left that off?
Yes, ma'am. There was a discussion. However, at this time, we decided to bring forward only those which are currently protected by law.
And additionally, that would be a change to city policy. We didn't want to confuse separating these two into two. We felt that would better be a discussion we could have for council in a workshop setting about is that direction that the city wants, that we want to do, and then change that. It is addressed in the sexual harassment policy, down in the actual policy language. We didn't put it up there as a key. But we went back and forth on that and said, you know, what we're doing here is we're separating these two policies. We're updating some language to make sure that they're updated with the latest case law. But we didn't want to come in here and say, hey, we just want to separate these policies and, oh, yeah, we're sticking this in here and potentially surprise members of council or catch council off guard on a topic maybe they're not quite ready to discuss yet. And that if that is something that council wants us to, we can come back in a workshop setting and discuss that and then bring the policy back with those insertions in it at that time.
And maybe to add on that, again, I think Dudley was very tactful in how we went back and forth. I think we had some fairly strident debates and conversations about that. I think you had staff that felt very strongly on that. At the end of the day, as Dudley explained, we had talked about this as a splitting of policy and not making a significant change. That being said, I will say that I think one of the factors that allowed staff to reach consensus on that is that if you look at the sexual harassment policy, our feeling seemed to be is that if we had someone who was making comments, jokes, or harassing of a sexual nature over someone because of the sexual orientation policy, that would effectively be a violation of the policy. Inherently, the comments, jokes they're making are sexual in nature. And so while it may add additional protection with regard to orientation, and I guess I'm trying to be blunt, if you make a sexually suggestive joke or comment about someone, whether they're regardless of their orientation, that is a problem under the policy. The other part with regard to harassment is if you were to pick on or bully someone for whatever reason, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, race, whatnot, that is a problem under the harassment policy. So to be clear, likely we would still be arguing about this, if not for the fact that I think we came away feeling that even at this time without adding those, there are protections for the employees who work at the city of Schertz, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. But as Dudley said, we would certainly appreciate the direction from council if you would like us to come in and specifically outline to make that very clear. As part of it, we are happy to do that.
Yeah, I think when you leave that group out, it's kind of sending a message that they're just maybe not as important as some of the other groups. That's, again, my opinion on that. But I think, for me, it was glaring that group was specifically left off. And I can think of numerous cases when someone could be harassed for sexual orientation and it's not sexual harassment.
Any other questions? Mr. Edwards?
I have a question for Mr. Walters, actually. Credit cards. How many credit cards do we have actively now in the city that are active? And how many credit card companies do we actually have that have issued credit cards to the city?
We have two companies. There's still, I believe, American Express floating around, and then City Card. We have about 45 city-issued credit cards right now.
Including council?
Including council. One of the changes in this policy is that it will bring the management of the credit cards back under finance, as currently it's under purchasing. When we looked at benchmark cities, it was about a 50-50 split, whether it was considered a procurement-related issue and then it fall under purchasing, or if it was a finance-related due to the dollar amount controls related to that.
And so when we have department heads or people with credit cards that go out and purchase things on the local economy, are we requiring them to maybe go through the municipal buyers board for anything at that point? Some of the things that we're buying, for instance, we talked about some of the vending items. Is that something that's being bought through the municipal buyers board or anything, or contracts or anything? Have we thought about maybe putting those out for a vendor contract?
The type of items bought by credit cards are usually small items used in the day-to-day operation that we would just run down to the store and pick up. If we're buying large quantities or a large dollar amount item, they would fall under the purchasing policy and be required to go through buy board or go through that procedure as well to look it up.
Can we look at consolidating credit card companies to maybe have one vendor for our credit card? Absolutely. Wouldn't it be more feasible to have one vendor?
Yes.
Either or?
I concur.
Okay.
And if I may, Councilman, just to touch on something you talked about, the other thing with regard to this that James sort of mentioned in summary that's in the policy that as part of this we're trying to deal with better is, as he said, it's typically small items, infrequent purchases. So one of the things we have been looking at as part of this effort are, for example, where we should be issuing a PO within a vendor that we have an account with, as opposed to folks running down and using a credit card. So for instance, at Lowe's, we need to get away from using a credit card. We need to have an account with them, and folks need to have that PO number and go down with that. So that's part of a change that we're making, I think, is along the lines of what you talked about with regard to enforcement and review of this policy.
Yes, sir.
That is made clear in the policy.
And can you also provide us with a quarterly update on the credit cards as well?
In what manner?
Let us know what we're spending it on, in our financial statements. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Mr. Crawford?
I'd like to ask a question for Mr. Waite, because it's not about credit cards. And you may have not said what I'm going to ask, so I may have the wrong person. I thought I heard at the beginning of this discussion that what we have on our package is a summary of what these 6 items are. Did somebody say that, or am I just sort of dreaming that?
We presented a summary. Behind the CCM and the resolution are the 6 policies in their entirety.
Okay. And all of this stuff has been looked at by the attorney, so we know we're on the right track with respect to things that are sometimes esoteric.
They're the final piece of the vetting process. So as it goes through the vetting process with the employees and people suggest words and that kind of thing, we don't send it to the attorneys until we're done wordsmithing it. Then it goes to the attorneys, because if we send it to them and then we wordsmith it, we potentially undo something. So they have seen it as recently as the end of last week.
Thank you.
Dr. Scagliola?
Yeah, this good deal of information going on here. Let me take on the social media policy, see if I can put my finger in the hornet's nest. Absolutely wonderful job. Sarah briefed me, Ms. Gonzalez, on this policy. It applies to the employees of the city. Now, quite frankly, I have a check right here. The city apparently pays me for doing what I do, which kind of sort of makes me an employee of the city, I guess. And that's the key. You know, this social media policy applies to the employees, and I don't want to be the establish the type of leadership that is do as I say and not as I do. I think we on this council should abide by these principles also. I could give you my diatribe. Okay, I'll cut it short, okay? Because I do agree with what's in this policy that's been drafted. Employees should take care to ensure that their personal sites and posts are not confused for city-administered sites, or that their posts are endorsed by or are the city's position. Applies to employees, I believe it should apply to us as well. Employees must also be subject to disciplinary actions for internet postings that could be construed as serious misconduct, which is defined by the employee disciplinary policy as conduct that has an adverse effect on the city, on the confidence of the public in the integrity of the city government, or on the relationship of the employee and other employees. Okay, we don't necessarily on the city council have an employee discipline policy. However, we do have a code of conduct and code of ethics. And I'm not trying to abridge anybody's First Amendment rights. But, you know, I think our right to free speech a lot of times must be tempered by our responsibility to abide by our own code of conduct, our own code of ethics. And I believe Mr. Zek actually gave a presentation that addressed that issue about, yeah, free speech is a valuable right. However, some things supersede that right. Responsibility, ethics. So I don't know why you stood up. I didn't have anything to address to you.
Okay, I was like.
But thank you. You gave me someone to talk to. And that's my position on the social media policy. As far as I'm concerned, if we have consensus on this council that if it's good enough for our employees, it ought to be good enough for us. I'll stop talking. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Davis.
On an unrelated note, on the credit card use policy, I know that's not required approval by the city council. I was glad to hear that we're looking at some of those purchases and cleaning up where we have an account or a line of credit with somebody versus everyone just out there going on their own. The one question I had there in paragraph 3 where it says the credit card should not be used for personal or unauthorized purposes, including purchases not in the city's purchasing guidelines. I didn't see any other clarification in there where you define or talk about what an unauthorized purpose would be. And apparently we have a separate purchasing guideline that they'd have to be aware of with regards to this, to using a city credit card. Could we get a copy of those purchasing guidelines just for informational purposes sent out to the council?
Yes, we can. And there may have been a miswording. We can change that to the purchasing policy, which the city council has adopted. So any sort of purchase for municipal purposes has to follow that, and that limits who can approve what dollar amount and when we have to go out for bids and quotes and conceal. That's what that's referring to.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez?
First, they're well-drafted policies. I have a question concerning the interpersonal relationship. Under item 1, the transfer of the manager or supervisor's employment, should that also include subordinate?
So I'm happy to answer. I mean, initially, the discussion was that it was the manager or supervisor's responsibility to step up and to address this. And ultimately, they are in the leadership role. It is their responsibility, to address it. And so that was the position that we took, was that it's their role as the leader.
If they came in together and the subordinate said, hey, we want to start dating, and there's a position over here, I'm qualified, and I'd like to apply for that and try to transfer, we wouldn't prevent that.
Okay.
But from the city's perspective, this policy is to help us avoid sexual harassment issues down the line. And so anytime you have a person of power and a person that they oversee in a relationship, the concern is that really a mutually agreeable relationship, or is the subordinate so afraid of their supervisor that they're going along with the portrayance of this being a mutual relationship? And so in that case, if it's our decision, we're going to move the person that has the authority, because that is the one that relieves the risk the quickest for the city, as opposed to moving the subordinate out of a position that they've wanted and had for 10 or 15 years, let's say, and then once they're away and something happens with the supervisor and they go, that was not legit and you guys forced me to move, it just creates a further risk position. So we address it with the person in power. If the person in the subordinate role is willing to move, we'll take that into account and make that happen if we can. But if it's us working with them, we're going to address it with the person in the power role.
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Ms. Crawford?
Ms. Klepper, don't stand up. I just wanted to make a comment on what Mr. Scagliola said. I have the exact same feeling as he does, maybe not articulated as well, but if it's good enough for you and the other members of the city staff, it's good enough for us, or for me for sure. And if I do something that's not right, the mayor will remind me and tell me and address that, I'm sure, and that's okay. That's what we're supposed to do. So I wish it included us, but it doesn't, and I'm not going to fight that battle right now. Thank you.
All right, so what we do have before us is Resolution 18R18 for the 6 items that are before us. Other comments, questions, council?
I'd like to say you guys are doing a great job doing it. And would you say 4 items or?
Yeah, indeed. So is there a motion to be made regarding Resolution 18R18?
So moved. Second.
A motion to approve from Mr. Davis, second from Mr. Edwards. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Next, Mr. James.
Tonight's a night of more talking than normal. We'll see how this goes going forward. But on this note, just to let you know, going forward, we have about a half dozen other policies that staff will be working on. Some of those are HR policies. Some of those are finance policies, again, travel and training. Some of those are IT policies. We hope to have those to you in a couple of months. And then, frankly, given that I did not hear anything otherwise, we will look at other groups of employees that we would like to specifically reference in our sexual harassment policies, particularly with sexual orientation and gender identity is where we'll start, and then we'll go from there.
Very good. Next item we have on the agenda, we have a roll call vote confirmation. Mrs. Dennis?
Yes, pardon me. The consent agenda consisted of the minutes of February 6th. Motion was made by Councilmember Crawford, seconded by Councilmember Larson. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Council Members Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Pardon me. Item number 2, ordinance number 18M06, final reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Larson, seconded by Councilmember Crawford. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Council Members Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 3, ordinance number 18T05, final reading, with a motion to change to 357-700. Motion, pardon me, motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 4, the minutes of January 23rd. The second set as requested by Councilmember Crawford and edited. Motion was made by Councilmember Crawford, seconded by Councilmember Dr. Kaiser. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford. I'm sorry. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. Councilmember Gutierrez voted no. Motion passed. Item number 5, resolution number 1809. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Larson. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 6, resolution number 18R12. Motion was made by Councilmember Larson, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 7, resolution 18R13. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, seconded by Councilmember Davis. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 8, 18R14. Motion was made by Councilmember Crawford, seconded by Councilmember Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 9, resolution number 18R15. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Crawford. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Ordinance number 18M09 on first reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Davis, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 11, resolution number 18R16. Motion was made by Councilmember Larson, seconded by Councilmember Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 12, resolution number 18R17. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Dr. Kaiser. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 13, ordinance number 17S50, final reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Crawford. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 14, ordinance number 18S07 on first reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Davis. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 15, ordinance number 18S08 on first reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Davis, seconded by Dr. Kaiser. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 16, resolution number 18R18. Motion was made by Councilmember Davis, seconded by Councilmember Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed.
Nicely done. Thank you. Next items that we have on the agenda are requests and announcements. The first item are announcements by the acting city manager. Mr. James, do you have anything further?
Very briefly, and I'll be very brief. One of the written updates that you received in your packet was an update to the City of Schertz master calendar. A lot of that was to add festivals, events, things like that we have going on to correct some of the dates that were incorrect. But I wanted to point out specifically that we have added quarterly meetings and selected the dates for both the tax increment reinvestment zone TERS, which we held prior to this meeting. Councilman Crawford was elected chair, and then as well as the Animal Services Advisory Committee. I think by adding those on the calendar, making them quarterly, we ensure that we meet, we ensure that we have the appropriate communication and oversight. So,
thank you, sir. Next item we have is item 18, request by mayor and council members that items be placed on a future city council agenda. Anything that we don't have that we need on a future agenda? Dr. Scagliola.
Yeah, I don't know if this needs to be an agenda item, but I do have a request for some information. Driving along the Elbell Road in front of the high school, and the intersection of Westchester and Elbell specifically. A couple of years back, we decided to put no parking signs towards the intersection there, and it's still, it did fix the problem at the time, but it's still a very hazardous intersection. And I'm wondering if we could actually have someone go out there and take a look to see how many potential accidents have almost happened there. I think it's still an unsafe intersection that needs to be looked at.
So you want a briefing before the full council, or just you want Mr. James and the chief to get back to you with some information, or what would you like?
I think it'd be nice to have a briefing, for just for the findings, to let us know what happened.
Okay. It's okay just when staff has that prepared that they bring it forward? Is there a specific date?
Within a week or two at their convenience.
Okay, perfect. All right, anyone else? Hearing nothing, we'll move on. Mr. Larson?
Sorry, I was late on the gun there. This is actually, I think there's probably a lot of interest in this, but I was just wondering if we can get an update on the flooding issue in northern Schertz, where that breakaway gate is, and the neighborhood has slipped my mind. But when we had our meeting there, Scenic Hills, there was a lot of concern and discussion that it seems like it's been going on a long time, and I believe when we left there was going to be engineering doing a review, but because of uncertainty, I just wonder if we can have a public briefing in front of council so that residents can also have access to that information just to see where we're at.
Okay. Don't seem to be any objections. Mr. Crawford?
I don't know if it should be on council to discuss, but I like Mr. Edwards' comments about tree moving, and maybe I could talk to Mr. James about that and see if it's worth any further discussion at some later time. Maybe not, probably not on council agenda.
Okay. Anything else? All right. We're going to number 19, announcements of the mayor and council members. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola.
Last Thursday, we welcomed the Kerr County trail riders out there. Want to thank HEB and the chamber and the city officials for their presence out there. We welcomed them into the city and filled their bellies and sent them on their way. It was really a wonderful tradition. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Davis?
Just defer to Mr. James. I believe we have a change to the schedule for the Main Street.
We're going to push it back a couple weeks to make sure we can get everybody there.
Okay. Mr. Gutierrez?
Yeah, I just want to thank Frost Bank for hosting the local cowboy breakfast we had on Thursday morning. And I also want to thank Mr. James and Mr. Wade. I was hesitant on going to the animal shelter due to my asthma. I couldn't be in there for more than 5 minutes. Somehow the air quality has improved, and thanks for making that happen. Appreciate it.
Very good. Mr. Larson? Mr. Edwards.
Mr. Mayor, I want to thank EDC and also Mr. Brian James for giving us the opportunity yesterday to tour Vision Works and look at some of the great investments that they're doing in our city, and also to inform people that they're actually going to be hiring about, 130 people? Yep. Another great investment into the city of Schertz. So thank you again, guys, for what you've done.
Very good. Dr. Kaiser?
I don't have anything.
Mr. Crawford?
I'd like to thank Mr. James, Ms. Woods, and Ms. Grove for the hour that they spent with me on the Building and Standards Ordinance and explained some things that made it much easier to understand what was going on. Thank you.
Very good. I would just like to say thank you to Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola for taking care of the Kerr County riders that came through. I had to chair the Northeast Partnership meeting and couldn't stay, and you were kind enough to stay and take care of that for us. And then thank Mr. Edwards for being at the Vision Works facility. I could not get away from my day job, so thanks for the coverage there. And then I'm going to pass this down because we've updated our ethics policy. Everyone has a place to sign. I'm going to pass that down and ask that everyone sign that for the city secretary, and I don't have anything else after that. So if there's nothing else from staff or from council, then we stand adjourned.